Oh, well,
Hello, and welcome back to Inside Movies Galore. I am one of your hosts, but tonight we are starting a different month here on Inside Movies Galore, where we are um, doing something a little different. I think we've done this before. I believe we have covered movies that we have chosen to come back and re-talk about them. So why don't I give this over to Brandon, which I guess one of his choices got through on our voting categories when we voted it through. Tell us, which movie are we subjected to tonight?
so tonight we are going to do the Julie Taymor film Across the Universe. This is one that when we did this before, and it's kind of I guess, a fifth anniversary thing if you think about it, because we're kind of celebrating past discussions. This one has actually not. I mean, we have everybody from the last discussion, but then we've added a number more because there was only three of us last time. So this will be fun.
I,
Across the Universe,
I would say it's now the 15th anniversary of this movie.
which is another cool milestone. We originally covered this in June of 2020, and the this is a musical, essentially utilizing the Beatles catalog to tell a love story during the turbulent time of the late 60s and early 70s. So, quite a interesting time to be alive, to be sure. So why don't we go ahead and start with first impressions? Well, I will just go ahead and just start on the lineup to end with Jake at the end. So we'll start with you, Dave. Was this your? Well, I know it wasn't your first time because you were on the last discussion.
No, it's definitely not my first time watching this. And honestly, this was a film that Tammy had heard about and wanted to see. And so I'm not sure. I don't think we saw it in the theaters, but we definitely saw it once it came to a video. And I know she really liked it. Um, me, I, I I like it. I love the story. I love the trippiness in the film. Um, but it's not my favorite. Not saying that it's unwatchable or anything like that, but it's a movie. I mean, it follows some different pathways of some different characters, and I think it uses the music well to its advantage, and it's enjoyable. It's
Uh,
something that I can rewatch,
so
and
better than Gosford Park, right?
yeah, definitely better than Gosford Park. That was a bore. No offense, but that being said, um, I I think that a lot of people enjoy this movie. I enjoy it for the music, and I enjoy it because of its imagery. Other than that, I mean, I do think that I have it within my collection. It's just not the first film that I will probably stick on my television to watch. So
Oh,
um, that's where I'm at on it.
understandable. So, how about you, Tammy? Was this your first time watching Across the Universe?
Oh no, like David said, I had seen the ads and stuff for it when it came out, and I was, really interested in it. Um, I love the music that's in it, and I like how the love story is portrayed, and it's just done in a neat way, and it's just you see so many different viewpoints at that time. You know, it's not just a love story. You see what's like kind of like going on around the. So it's I guess that's why I liked it. Is it's a musical, but it's a love story, but it's showing what's going on at the time, and not just like here, but like in the war and what and everything. It's like a story within a story. So
Oh
I
yeah.
definitely enjoy it.
Well, I do appreciate your view on that, and we'll move on to Kroll. Was this your first time watching this film? Kroll?
You there?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Didn't hear you say my name. Yeah. It's not the first time I watched the movie. I watched it. I'm not sure I watched exactly when it came out. I'm pretty sure it was on cable, so it might have been about a year later or a little less. I know I'd wanted to watch it. I had heard about it, but I had heard basically it was a movie using Beatles songs, and that's about all I heard. Um, and in my opinion, I think it's a bit more than that. Um, it definitely has Beatles songs, but it incorporates all the songs into a great great love story and just story in general of times during the Vietnam War. I mean, they don't actually say that in the movie which war it was, but anyone who knows the history will know that that's what it was. Um, yeah. So the film, I love it. It's just everything visually. Um, it's interesting in many ways. The music is just phenomenal. I mean, I love the Beatles. I think if you're not a Beatles fan, that the movie can still be decent. You probably won't get any of the references to the people, because every all the main people in the movie are are songs and Beatles songs. So especially the main character Jude and Lucy. Um, so it's a great story, and it weaves it so well with the Beatles catalog. I think it was a great job, absolutely great job. I love the film. Probably my very 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 close second favorite musical. Um, so, well, that's my opinion on it.
All right, thank you. And Forrest, was this your first time checking out Across the Universe?
Yes, it was. I was aware. I mean, I was aware of this movie when aware of this movie when it came out. I remember because I was in college back then doing film classes, and I remember hearing a lot of talk about it. Like among classmates and just like among and on film and on film message boards. I never got, but I didn't get around to watching it when it came out. And looking back, 2007 was a pretty stacked year as far as like great movies. So it was just a lot, just kind of just a lot too much. It kind of just got lost in the shuffle for me. And I like the Beatles, but I'm not like a I've never considered myself a Beatlemaniac. Although I do love, although Yellow Submarine is one of my favorite animated movies of all time. Yes, first time watching it. I'm also not big on musicals. To be honest, I mean, while I do have exceptions, I'm not big on musicals. But I did. But yeah, first time watch. Very well. It's very well made. The editing, the special effects, the cinematography is all really well done. The also like the also just how it goes from like one Beatles song to another. It's all the songs are very well, like are very. I mean, even though there was a lot going on with the story, but I felt like but I do feel like the use of the songs was very well placed. Um, and but yeah, it was. I mean, yeah, I was surprised. But yeah, it was overall. I think. I think even though I didn't get around to watch, even though this isn't a first time watch, but I think. But I mean, I guess I would. I don't know. I wouldn't say. I guess I'm kind of with Dave, where it's like where I'm not like I love it, but like it's really well done. But it's a very well done movie.
It's hard to forget anything that Julie Taymor puts out.
Yeah.
That is for sure.
Yeah, it's I mean, the music. I mean, the use of the music is excellent, and it's a visually stunning movie with a pretty good. Yeah, I'd say it's got some pretty. That's pretty solid. I mean, well, okay. The names I recognize. Okay, Evan Rachel Wood. And Salma Hayek are probably the only names I recognize on this cast. And Dylan Baker and Bono.
Bono, yeah. Actually, and gosh,
and Eddie Izzard too.
Eddie Izzard, yeah. I was gonna say. Actually, did you see that? You're actually in New York. Did you see that Spider-Man Broadway play that she did? I think I ran there.
No, I did not. I don't know. I was not too down. I mean, I am a huge Spider-Man fan. I'm a big comic book reader, but I had no desire. But I remember having no desire to see that Spider-Man musical, and I heard it was a huge shit show.
Yeah, well, that's what I've heard. All right. Well, thank you, Forrest. So. Again, and welcome back, Dane. It's great to have you on again. Was this your first time checking out this show?
No, it was not. So I have a history with this film in a good way. So I remembered this movie came out. I would have been in high school is when I saw the trailer for it, and I had the deluxe edition soundtrack. It was my first real exposure to the Beatles deep cuts. Now I grew up with the Beatles 1, the greatest hits album that came out in 2000, and I kind of knew the Beatles as like 8 days a week, Love Me Do, I Want to Hold Your Hand, that kind of stuff. That's what I knew the Beatles as. And then when I heard this soundtrack, I was like, wow, the Beatles were a lot deeper than I realized, at that age. So I will listen to the soundtrack front to back, every track, knew it by heart before I'd even seen the film. And then that's what got me into the Beatles albums. And so I listened to the original Beatles versions of these songs and loved the Beatles deeply. And, just explored Beatles history, the whole 9 yards. And that was before I even saw the film, which I would actually highly recommend. With musicals in particular, I'd highly recommend you listen to the soundtrack thoroughly before you see the movie, because it does kind of help you to focus in and fully appreciate everything a little bit more. At least it did for me. But I saw the movie when it first came out on DVD, and I loved it. I thought it was visually stunning. I thought the songs drove the story forward as musicals are supposed to do. But unlike stage musicals that get adapted into movies, which those ones do tend to feel a little bit like they have their hands tied behind their back and can't really bust out in a cinematically rich way, fully exploring the visual medium. Julie Taymor she hasn't made that many movies, but the few that she has have, whether you love them or hate them, they are a visual feast for the eyes. She really pushes the film medium far forward and uses every trick in the book to tell the story with visuals. And because this was not adapted from anything on the stage, it's not restricted in that way. It's a cinematic musical completely. And I think it uses Beatles music very effectively to push the story forward, to communicate the emotions of the characters. It's almost wall-to-wall music. the character names are lifted from Beatles songs like Jude, Lucy, Max, JoJo. You know, any Beatles fan can recognize this stuff. Lines of dialogue even are lifted from specific songs like When I'm 64 and She Came In Through the Bathroom Window, etc. So as far as an adaptation of a particular artist catalog, I think this thing excels. And again, in the visual department, in creating a feeling, creating an experience, it really excels. That being said, I do think that it is not a terribly deep film in terms of the story, but it's also not really meant to be. It's musicals in general as a genre are not really meant to make you think all that much because they're about feeling. They're about creating an experience. They're about music and dance and color and editing and that kind of thing, energy. And so, in that respect, this thing excels and it does so using the film medium to its fullest. And yeah, I think for what it intends to be, it absolutely excels. Now, I can understand that, you know, it may not be everybody's cup of tea. You may not get swept up in the feeling, the music. You may not even be a Beatles fan or fan of the 60s or psychedelica or whatever. I think if you go into it with the right mindset and relative to what the movie intends to do, then I think it's one of a kind. And I think it is a good testament to what Julie Taymor does well as an artist. I think she's absolutely spectacular.
Yeah, totally agree about the album. I remember that I had fully studied the Les Mis Broadway album before seeing that live, and I think that improved my appreciation for that. So I can definitely attest to how that can be. So let's see here. Jake wanted me to hold on him, so let's go to Dustin. Was this your first time with this movie?
So this was my first time actually hearing about this movie. I thought this was going to be something completely different. I didn't realize it was a musical. So for the first hour or so of this, it just felt like a bunch of like vignettes like strung together with no really coherent narrative. It was just like, oh, here's some new people. Oh, here's some new people. And it's like, where's this going? So it had some cool sequences, but it really did not impress me very much overall. Like the strawberry thing was cool. The Uncle Sam montage was really interesting. There were some creative moments that were really nice, but overall, this was not my thing. And as for the Beatles music, oh man, people are gonna be so mad at me. I've always considered the Beatles to be the most overrated band in history. Like the music just does absolutely nothing for me. So it was kind of like a big minus on this, in addition to kind of the incoherency. So I was not a fan of this one. I'll just delicately say. Like I did eventually figure out, oh, okay, so they're meeting each other. Like it almost feels like an anthology to some extent. Because their stories are just so disjointed before they kind of mash into each other.
I mean, the way I see it, because you're given the title "Across the Universe," so it's kind, all these people, they're all over the, not the universe, but the world. And the Beatles, and how the Beatles play into their narrative, into their story, their individual stories.
Well, this thing really throws the Beatles catalog, Beatles history, 60s history, and other figures like Timothy Leary and Jimi Hendrix and people like that. Takes them all, kind of throws them into a blender, and you're either going to like that or you're not. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah, I view the 60s as like a failed generation, so I was kind of like not on board with it.
Okay, I was gonna make. I'll make the correct. Okay, boomer.
Oh, I
No,
would have.
They
I
are
would
the
have.
boomers, the 60s generation born.
I think that is them. That's the
Well,
point. That's the point.
I would have trotted out the Big Lebowski. You
The source of our
lost.
misery.
The bums lost. You hear me, Lebowski? The bums will always lose.
But I will say that living on, living on Long Island, there's a ton of a lot of aging boomers who were like big Beatle fans, and like they won't like a lot of them probably saw the Beatles at Shea Stadium back in the '60s, and like they won't, and like I'll go like I remember like this was just my experience with one boomer Beatle fan who would not shut the fuck up about the Beatles. And when I told the guy that I was into heavy metal, he just started trashing my music. So I'm like, that kind of did did sour me on Beatles fans. That did kind of sour my perception of Beatle maniacs.
He totally forgot about a little track called Helter Skelter. I'm sorry to say,
which ended up getting covered by Motley
I
Crue.
remember it.
And Marilyn Manson and a ton of other people. I mean, it's basically a proto metal song and a very very
Ghost
good
has
one.
a pretty cool Beatles cover song. I think "Here Comes the Sun" is what it's called.
Oh well, Here Comes the Sun. That's been covered by a ton of people. I mean, the Beatles catalog is one of the best musical catalogs ever, at least in the 20th century, in terms of lyrics and all that stuff. But that's a whole other discussion.
Though it is kind of good. I know we lost at least one person that would have been on here that does not like the Beatles. So it's kind of good to have somebody with that perspective in on this discussion. So
Indeed.
that is.
I didn't know I was getting beatled. Otherwise, I probably would have dipped.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Beatles, but I don't know. I think as far as the British invasion is concerned, I'm leaning a little more towards the Rolling Stones.
The Rolling Stones, they started off as kind of riding the Beatles' coattails, and then once they broke up and the 70s happened, then the Rolling Stones kind of took on their own identity, which was nice.
Yeah, I agree. They were overrated at first, and then they got better.
Well, I should stress that doesn't mean that the Beatles aren't like historically significant. It's just kind of what's a good analogy for this?
I'm waiting for someone to
anymore. Let's put it
I'm
that
waiting
way.
for someone. I'm waiting for someone to come out of left field and be like, "I like the Who."
Who doesn't like the Who?
I like the Who too. But I'm waiting for someone.
Heard the Who.
I just saw.
Zeppelin was the best invasion.
Well, but that was after the 60s. But still.
Yeah, that was like post
band with Herman's Hermits, so they don't get mentioned a lot, but they were part of the British invasion.
I love Herman's Hermits, but anyway, Jake's here.
Early Bowie all the way. But yes, Jake, is this your first time checking out this movie?
Indeed, it is not. Now, I will say my road to the Beatles was a strange one, and I will agree with comments that I've heard already in my limited time on tonight that I do agree that they're an overrated group. But I also do, as Dustin just said, acknowledge the historical significance. I will also say that their music for me is a mixed bag. I friggin' love While My Guitar Gently Weeps, Here Comes the Sun, Eleanor Rigby, Norwegian Wood. There are some songs I friggin' love. And there are some where I'm like, is that a song? It's a mixed bag. But
what, you mean Revolution 9 isn't a song? Are you kidding?
Well, in terms of importance and influence on pop culture, though, they are huge. And when I heard about this movie, I was intrigued. This was one that caught my interest before it came out. And I actually saw it in theaters and loved it. Absolutely loved it. And went back. I managed to catch a double feature of this one and Sweeney Todd, which made the first time I saw I think it was the first time I'd ever seen a musical twice in theaters. And it was two musicals. And
that was The Bird, right?
Yeah, that was at the Bird. And this one and Sweeney Todd, let me tell you, what a pairing. But what's that?
I said, that's an odd mix.
We need to cover Sweeney Todd eventually on this channel. That one seems to fit into everyone's macabre tastes. But this one, though, I absolutely loved it. I never have loved it to the degree that I know Brandon does, and he can tell you all about that when you get to him. But I very much enjoyed it. I've seen it, I don't know how many times. I probably saw it 4 or 5 times over the years. Maybe more, but I doubt it. I don't tend to be someone that just sits and watches the same movie again and again and again. I don't really have the time, but I've encountered this one a few times. And it is one of my hangout films, one of my ones that I will watch just because I like spending time with the characters. To crib a phrase that I heard from Quentin Tarantino years ago, I like that idea of hangout films. And of course, I was on this discussion when we had it. You said it was back in 2020, Brandon, I think it was.
Yep, such a great year.
2020, yeah, everyone's favorite year. But and I believe we had a much smaller group on then, which is why I know Brandon wanted to revisit it. But we had a good discussion, and I don't think I've seen it since then. But I watched it again last night, and then today I finally sat down and watched the commentary track with director Julie Taymor and the composer Elliot Goldenthal, and they had some interesting things to add to that I had, some of which I knew already, and some of which I did not. But yeah, Taymor very precisely and specifically chose the Beatles because of their important cultural impact at this important cultural moment in U.S. history. And they really did, I think they did a brilliant job incorporating their catalog into a film about the 60s. And they did a really good job of capturing a cross-section of people from the 60s. One of the reasons, I guess, Dustin, I'm not as worried about the disparate plot threads. I wouldn't call it an anthology film so much as it is a full ensemble film in the mold of something by Robert Altman or P.T. Anderson. I mean, you have multiple story arcs going in, over, above, and around each other, and they're all connected, but they're not. It's not a linear story by any means. But the way that they use the music as the connecting thread, I think is fairly brilliant. And the film does have some really good, solid covers. It has some really awesome cameos from the likes of Bono, Salma Hayek, and Joe Cocker, Eddie Izzard. Those are the biggest names in the cast, and none of them are on screen for more than 5 minutes. 6. I guess Bono is probably 6 or 7 minutes. But yeah, they're and you have this fresh-faced cast of mostly unknowns. Evan Rachel Wood had been around for a few years, but I agree.
12. I think she'd been around like at least 13 years by that point, because she was a child actress.
Well, I think she really, her breakout film, as far as I know, was 13, which came out, I think, 4 or 5 years before this.
I know she was also in Practical Magic. I think it's the younger version of Nicole Kidman.
Well, like I said, I think her breakout role was 13, but she's been around for years. But it was a breakout for Jim Sturgis, who did a few things before largely disappearing. Martin Luther McCoy and Dana Fuke are professional musicians. I don't know what else they've done for acting, but overall, I just, like I said, I love this film. I kind of go back and forward on how much the artsiness of it will hit me at any given viewing. I appreciated it more this time than I did last time. I think last time I was thinking the artsiness was a little flashy.
Yeah.
And it is at times, but Julie Taymor is well known for her artistic flair. So, yeah, I I'm kind of glad to have an opportunity to revisit this one with a larger group. It kind of is a shame we couldn't get all the regulars on here. I would have liked to hear from more, but I think it'll still be fun.
Well, I'm glad I'm on for this one. Well, because I wanted to be here because it's obviously Brandon's favorite, but also, this film did leave a big impression on me at a very impressionable age, because it really showed that the film medium and the usage of visuals and music can create an unbelievable impression on everyone who sees it, which again, I would stress, if you're going into this expecting anything too terribly thought-provoking, I don't think you're gonna see anything too new or anything like that in terms of, like, ideas present, but that's really not what it's about. I think in terms of creating an experience and doing justice to the feeling of the Beatles in that particularly tumultuous time and that kind of stuff. I think it does what it's means to do. I remember I also was going through a Moulin Rouge phase at that same time. And Moulin Rouge was something that I had to, it was an acquired taste. I didn't really like it at first, even though I loved the music, but I did kind of get used to it. It has not aged as well as I remembered it, but then this one, I think, similar idea of a jukebox musical that's original to film, that uses the film medium very effectively, all that. But I think this one goes all the way, and I think it really I'm a big fan of psychedelica in general, psychedelic rock, psychedelic, art, all that kinda stuff, despite being the exact opposite of a drug user, I still love the creativity of that period, and I love how well this film uses what were then modern film techniques and,
Dane, not to interrupt you, but what's the opposite of a drug user?
straight edge, I guess, is the term.
Pepsi user?
Something like that.
All right.
But
Someone who gets high on life.
yeah, that's it. We'll go with that. But yeah, I think this one uses what were then new techniques to just push the film medium to its furthest extent. And it's just too bad that Julie Taymor's films are not more commercially successful, or else she could keep pushing the film medium forward, I think. You should definitely check out her version of Titus, from William Shakespeare's Titus Andronicus. Highly recommend that one. And yeah, extra special shout outs to Evan Rachel Wood and to Jim Sturgis. I thought they were excellent, and excellent together. I love their chemistry.
I need to see more of her work. But as far as I'm concerned on it, I'm very glad that we get the opportunity to hit this again. It was 2020 was kind of a rough year for most of us. I'd like to think that the world had a collective bad year that year. And
you know what? Some years from now, it would be great to do something like Across the Universe, but about the late 2010s, early 2020s. I think that would be awesome.
Right.
But this one, when we originally did it, I did it as a double feature with the regular, with another one that is actually by a Beatle called what was it? Give My Regards to Broad Street, with Paul McCartney at the helm, and that one, of course, we had a little bit larger an audience, but that part of the audience left after a pretty bad discussion. But I thought we had a pretty tight discussion on the film the first time. But I'm very glad to get other people on board with this. I saw this film. I had heard about it a lot earlier. I saw the adverts. I was not living in a place that had easy access to a theater at the time. The quickest theater was either Rocky Mount or Richmond, and neither one of those actually Petersburg, but neither one of those was an easy hike for me. at the time where I was. And I eventually did see it. And I believe, I don't know if I was with you for that, Jake, but I know I saw it first at the Bird Theater. And I think it was that double feature because I feel like, because I saw Sweeney Todd first in the Bird as well.
Well, maybe it was. That might have been my excuse for going back.
Maybe because, again, as time goes, and it has been a long time. I remember wanting to see it because I've always liked the Beatles. They were never my favorite band, and I don't want people to mistake that. I mean, my favorite band's always been Queen, and it still remains so to this day. But the Beatles always had a special place for me. My father loved, what was it? He loved Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. I heard that a lot, and I used to listen to both Revolver and, gosh, I can't think of the other one. And there was another album I listened to, a metric ton of Help, I believe, a lot growing up. So I had a lot of appreciation for a lot of those songs. And when I finally sat down and saw it, it blew me away. I usually, and Jake will tell you, I'm not one for pretentious art pieces at all. But for some reason, this piece held my attention more, and to this day is, if not one of the few, probably even the only film I can say I have watched consistently where I have not had any, and I mean any, interruption whatsoever. And I've got to check this because it sounds like the cats are destroying something. But that's why this is one of my favorite films. Is I haven't had the urge, even when I watched it this time, didn't have the urge at all to look at my phone, not once throughout the entirety. And I can't say that about any of the films we've covered on here before. So that's a plus for it. We have a pretty good start to this as we go through, because we are met with Jude kind of towards the end of the film, recalling all of the turbulent events, where we do have that reference to Rubber Soul that Dane had pointed out to me earlier, as he is recalling it. And of course, you get to see a lot of the flashes of a lot of the turbulence of the 60s, all of the Vietnam protests, with Helter Skelter playing in the background. All to set us up for the opening line there. What do y'all think of using this type of flashback as a way of running this?
Oh, I was hooked on the soundtrack and in the film itself. I was hooked right from the beginning because, again, that was my first time hearing a lot of these songs. But the way that they use Girl, because the actual Beatles recording is nothing like that at all, but the way that they use it in this film reminded me. I referenced Moulin Rouge because the way that they introduce the story in Moulin Rouge with that version of Nature Boy is very similar. It's the overture. It's the thing that hooks you in to the story that's about to unfold, and you get a little bit of flash of what's to come. And Moulin Rouge does something very similar. If anything, it does it a little bit more on the nose with the narration that they have there. But this one lets the music do the talking, which is good. That's what a musical should do, and the visuals too. But that hooks you right from the beginning, as does the shot with Jim Sturgis on the beach. It really makes you think that something serious has gone down, and indeed it has. But yeah, it captivates you right from the beginning and gives you a good sense of what's to come.
I really enjoyed it. I have never seen Moulin Rouge, heard of it, of course, but so I never saw anything quite like done like this. So I thought it was a great way to start the movie. I love how they, like I said before, that how they use the music, like you said, to tell a story. It's absolutely wonderful. And a few things I didn't say before that I thought of that I wanted to say was This is actually a DVD I own. Many people know that I haven't really been much of a collector at all. I'd gotten my mom's collection. So I picked this up to add on to the collection a couple months ago from Jake. And that's when I watched it again. I'd seen it, I believe I saw it one other time besides the original time. And then I saw it a few months ago when I picked it up. And then again today. Also, Beatles. I love the Beatles, but yeah, they're not my favorite band either. That goes to Motley Crue. Who did they? Who said cover one of the Beatles songs? So that's cool.
So, as far as sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that I grew up with the Beatles, and when I was about a teenager, I was quietly a Beatles fan because it wasn't cool to be a Beatles fan when I was a teenager. So no one knew I liked it, but I liked it. It was my mom loved the Beatles. She loved mostly anything before they did the drugs. She put it. Anything after she didn't. Me on the other hand, I love both. Except for I'm the Walrus, I was not a fan of until more recently. I grew to like it more.
So, and Donna, is it Dana? How do you say her name?
Isn't it Dana Fuchs? I think is the correct
name. Taymor pronounced it Fuchs on the commentary.
But it looks like something else, but we're not.
Yeah, I was gonna say it looks like I pronounce it Fox.
I was trying to avoid that, but yes, but she really did. To tell you the truth, she knocked that out of the park. Just hearing her voice with Helter Skelter, and she did a very good Janis Joplin style character, and that was really. I thought that it really did a good job of shocking things into place, but we move ourselves right into two versions of Hold Me Tight with Jim Sturgis on one end and Evan Rachel Wood on the other. And of course you see the two kind of very different worlds that they're coming from, where she's kind of that traditional 60s high school dance, and he's in one of these underground clubs that the British had back in that time.
Yeah, the high school dance kind of reminds me of like the Fish Under the Sea dance or the Enchantment Under the Sea dance from like
similar time period.
I might have said Grease, well, but the very faithful recreation of the Cavern Club, by the way. The film is bookended very nicely with the recreation of the Cavern Club, where the Beatles got their start, and then the rooftop concert at the end. So it bookends it very nicely. But yeah, Liverpool, for those who don't know, was is still a very working class blue collar town. People from Liverpool are not really well thought of by people from like London, and it's kind of the opposite. They have the opposite of what we have here, where like their people from the south of England are more like urbane, more egalitarian, more sophisticated, and people in the Midlands and North England are more considered what we would call rednecks, more working class. And Liverpool in particular is kind of like their Mississippi in a sense. People from Liverpool are not really thought of that highly by people in the south of England. But out of that environment and out of like Birmingham, which is the birthplace of heavy metal, but out of Liverpool came the Beatles and other bands and things like that. So they speak to that very nicely.
I really love the way that they do this, because again, a lot of the first half of the movie, as Dustin has kind of laid out earlier, is character setup. I mean, that's really, if you look at it, the movie kind of goes in, I would say, 4 parts, if you want to look at it, with kind of a 5th part in the middle being that weird psychedelic experience to separate the two halves. And I love this introduction to both characters, because you get to see Lucy being the kind of preppy, rich suburban white girl, and you get to see Jude as kind of the rough working class young man who kind of had to leave early in order to try and help home. But what did the rest of y'all think of the opening sequence, getting to meet the two main characters?
Let's
I personally loved it. It was a great way to introduce them, and again with the music telling the story. But you see the two couples, but you definitely if you watch, you can definitely tell that these two are meant to meet each other. Even though at the time they seem to be in love with the person they're with. But yeah, I love the way they introduced him. It was great.
Well, as it seems every journey begins. It seems like these two couples in this very beginning. I mean, they are obviously in love at the time. Maybe not to the degree of love that we consider love to be, but
No,
one
love
sets
though
out
lasts
on
forever.
his journey. One sets out on his journey to find his father, and the other just kind of has to deal with the situation of her love going off to war.
Yeah,
So,
her journey in this, Lucy's journey in this, is very indicative of what I'm sure a lot of people went through at that time of coming from a more kind of conservative, white bread upbringing, and then getting swept up in the activism and the turmoil of the period, that sort of thing. And it definitely covers that arc, very thoroughly, as well as some of the towards the end, some of the radicalization aspects of it with bombs and things like that. So it's definitely it's kind of cliff notes, but it's more about the experience of it all, and it definitely. I would argue that she undergoes a more significant arc than Jude does. Jude's quest is more of being an artist and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. But nonetheless, they mirror each other fairly effectively. And I think they do have chemistry once they meet.
Yeah, two
Yeah,
individuals
that's
finding
undeniable.
themselves through each other.
Yeah, it's undeniable their chemistry.
One and I didn't experiment with this film because I knew the music like front to back, the soundtrack version of the songs and the original songs. So I have to confess I actually did skip through the musical segments. I got the visuals in my head, but I wanted to kind of laser focus on the dialogue just because that part was a little thin in my memory. And it was just interesting little things you pick up on and that kind of stuff. And it's some of the things that, again, it's a little bit surface level, but I found myself kind of relating to Jude quite a bit more this time around, in terms of a lot of turmoil going on around me, but it's like you want to become a better artist and you want to find a deeper sense of purpose. And the strawberry that he paints, I think, is that's an important symbol because it is life, it's beauty, it's blood also because it's blood red, it's sweet, it's organic, it's passionate, it's kind of the film in a nutshell, and there's a reason why they put it on the poster.
Don't
But I
forget
was
sexual, as he said.
and that too, but it's like it's kind of everything, and I responded to that bit of symbolism, and also just that drive to find something that kind of encapsulates all that you're feeling amidst other people's, turmoil and other people's activism and that kind of stuff. So I wanted to highlight that because I think they did that pretty effectively, as well as like what happens when you're trying to focus on something and your partner is going off in another direction, which is not contrary to yours necessarily, but they devote too much to their own work and it is driving the relationship apart, etc.
So, and a lot of people actually, one of the things we were asking each other is like, what time period does this take place at? And I want to say that it was 1966 or late 66 because it was around November. Actually, no, probably the end of summer is when it started. But then November was when
Oh no,
it picked up.
this definitely
Probably-
started earlier.
Actually, yeah, prior to summer with the prom, I would say, because the
Yeah.
guy boyfriend graduates, and then he goes off to the military,
Yeah.
and whereas Jude comes across, so that would probably be
Nope.
around summer of '66.
No. Commentary, Taymor straight up said that the story starts in early 60s and they cover
Oh,
the
wow.
whole decade. They cover the whole decade, but they do it in a way to where it's part of the fantastical aspect of the film. They really cover more time than could have actually elapsed during the case of the film.
Because it is weird because you had the Detroit riots of '67 before they even moved to New York, which is kind of weird that they were kind of spending that long before that. It's but then again, time is fluid in this film, so I don't expect. But there was one other person that they show they debuted during this time period, which is Prudence, which I love Prudence's introduction because they kind of fake you out at first if you've never seen the film, and you think, I mean, she's singing "I Want to Hold Your Hand," and you see her staring, you think that she's looking at the football player, but then when she says, "Will you let me be your man?" or something like that, for the song, and you notice that it's actually a cheerleader she's looking at.
And Julie,
I love that too.
That was one of the more.
What's that?
She's like the Eponine of the story. In reference to Les Miserables, the story.
Yeah. Well, I was less especially in comparison to the Beatles catalog itself. I was less interested in a lot of the straight up covers, even though they do those very, very well. I was much more interested in the ones that were done in a different genre or a different tempo or a different context, whatever. And this was a good example of that. Totally reframes it in a way that's unique and interesting and powerful and indicative of character. And again, shout out to an underrated talent, TV Carpio, who played Prudence.
Well, they basically took an up-tempo, fairly frothy early 60s pop tune and turned it into a slow ballad. And again, Taymor
very melancholic too.
Yeah. Well, Taymor said in the description that she heard a cover by a woman where she kept that lyric, "I want to be your man." And she was like, "I love that." And she decided when she was putting this movie together that she wanted to do the same thing and use that as the jumping off point for this character.
Yeah.
And I said in the description, and I stand by it, when it comes to like heartbreakingly sad songs in movies, this is up there with John C. Reilly doing Mr. Cellophane in Chicago, or I wasn't joking, Jim Varney doing "Gee, I'm Glad It's Raining" in Ernest Goes to Camp. You know, it's such a heartbreakingly sad song, but at the end it turns around, the tempo picks up a bit. And I never really thought about the significance of this, but Taymor pointed out the way she's walking through all those football players without any concern whatsoever is basically just showing that to her, they might as well not even exist.
Right.
And I'm like, yeah.
She also the whole thing speaks very well to, you know, because I've talked to or heard from, you know, lesbians and that kind of stuff about that experience of you see a girl that you really like and you hope that they could see something in you that, and especially at that time, the probability of them feeling that same way was lower than it is now, or at least, you know, out in the open anyway. So it speaks to that very effectively. And I think that's one of the more ingenious reframing of a iconic song. And that out of the early Beatles catalog of like the more poppy stuff, "I Want to Hold Your Hand" was always my favorite, and still is out of that era of the Beatles. So I thought that was one of the more brilliant ways to do it, because like my favorite Beatles song of all time is Helter Skelter, but there they did it just as a straightforward cover, maybe with just a little bit more Janis Joplin in there, but it's like
Right.
I found that less interesting than how can we show this familiar song in a different way.
Yeah.
Yeah, and definitely they did that a lot. Like the one that they started with, "Hold Me Tight," was pretty much a straightforward
Yeah.
cover, but I think that was kind of of course they showed the two different versions of it, like the underground rock British version and then the popped up American version.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But it
Well,
really did do a great job for setting the time and the mood of like this is the music of the time and all that kind of stuff. So playing that one straight really helped with that. But I'll
Yeah.
admit it's kind of boring to listen to if you're just listening to it.
Well,
But
that is
no.
one point of
Not boring.
credit that I will give is even when a song is covered in a more conventional way, or more the way that we would have heard it, the original way with the Beatles, Julie Taymor very wisely, even if musically it's not that different, the visuals will be especially stunning or will fit, the piece very well. Like I'm thinking of, or visually she'll frame it in a different way. Like I Want You, She's So Heavy. A lot of visual information, a lot of key character information communicated in there. Or it'll just be simply stunning, like I Am the Walrus. That one isn't that
Right.
different from the studio album, or sorry, technically it was an EP. Magical Mystery Tour is an EP, but it's not that different. But it just is matched with an exceptional visual. So I give her credit for that. I just, as a piece of music, it's always more interesting to see, what can be done that's different, at least for me.
So how about the rest of y'all? What are your thoughts of Prudence as a character?
Right off the bat, yeah, I enjoy her, and like we've already said, she's singing, and they allude to, excuse me, she's singing about the football player, and you think it's him, and then it turns out to be the cheerleader, and I just think that's really cool, and you definitely feel sad for her, because like Dane said, I mean, to find a girl that would also have the same feelings, and also even have the feelings and actually state those feelings, because then it was way harder than it is now, to like she could have those feelings but feel like she couldn't state them herself, so it would be very, very low chance, like almost better than winning the lottery. So you definitely feel bad for her, and you wish that she could have got what she wanted.
Well, she kind of did towards the end, but
yeah,
I really wish there are a
Not the
couple of
beginning.
characters that I feel like I would have loved to see more of their individual stories, and Prudence is definitely one of them because she
Yeah,
goes through a lot of journeys off screen.
yeah, we didn't get to see a lot of.
Yeah, I thought she was kind of pretty underdeveloped compared to the rest of the cast.
Yeah. If anything, her story just in and of itself, maybe outside of a musical even, like the lesbian experience, well, the Asian American experience and the lesbian experience in the 60s, I am sure could make at least a novel, if not a film. And I'm sure there's probably at least a couple. I don't know how well known they are, but they have to.
Because I was gonna say, I'm half Asian myself. I feel like we would have been pretty much in the '60s, especially in a state like Ohio, we would have been invisible.
I'm sure.
Though
Well, and then you're
during the
then you're a
Vietnam
lesbian
War,
on top of that. It's like,
Yeah.
you're way underground.
the
You're a
problem would
lesbian,
be
Forrest?
during the Vietnam War. I would say there would probably been a problem.
I said you're a
See a lot of
lesbian, Forrest.
those.
No, I said I'm half Asian.
I know, I was just joking, because it's just the way you said it. It sounded like you were saying you were a lesbian. It's just a joke.
I mean, I do like women, so
I used to say I'm a lesbian trapped in a man's body, but that was way before that was a thing. It was a joke.
Actually, I do wonder if there was a lot of violence against Asian Americans during that 60s time frame. during that war. I
It
wouldn't
could
be
have been.
surprised if there was because
Yeah.
Nothing
because you know that.
nothing leaps to mind, but I am sure that it was there. It has to have
Yeah.
been.
Obviously, it wasn't.
I'd say hate.
newsworthy.
I kind of feel like back then hate crimes towards Asians aren't as prevalent as they are now, but there's still stereotypes about us being like the well, granted, I think this came more into more about us being like the model minority at the time, which still persists to this day.
Yeah, that's it. That's racism of a different sort.
Yeah,
It's like of a more, dare I say it, a more patronizingly positive, variety. But
exactly.
I am sure in more Asian American heavy communities that there probably was some more hate crimes that occurred, but I doubt that they're that as widely reported because the civil rights era was happening, and so a lot of
focuses more on
your
blacks.
Martin Luther Kings, your Malcolm X's would have been bigger at that time, which that does actually remind me, possibly my favorite scene / musical reframing in the whole film is Let It Be. What they do with that, with the Detroit unrest, that was powerful.
That
I
was
think we
great.
did get the introduction to what's his name, Joe, no, Max, to Max before them. But yes, I definitely want to hit that. So Max is, of course, Jude finds him because Jude is going to find his father. He thinks his father works at Princeton, so he must be a high-ranking professor. Turns out he's the janitor instead. But hey, he does work there, and of course they kind of just have that exchange as he says, "I just want us to know the other exists."
His books and papers that he dropped, because he was just kind of a mess running around with all his books and papers, just flopping around. No book bag or anything. So,
but Jude does save Max after he breaks a window playing golf on a rooftop.
Second time.
I really do like the way that they introduce Max with kind of an almost sloppy version of I get by with little help from my friends. I also always crack up whenever they're at the bar and you've got the one guy, like the one drunk guy's like, could it be anybody?
Like they all laughed about it too. The actors. I mean, I don't know if that was an ad lib laugh or it was meant to, but yeah, it was funny. It's definitely a funny scene with the drunk guy there. Just like the hobo a little later singing "Hey Jojo."
The only thing I feel regret for is even though they mentioned him killing people, I mean, if any mentioned the hammer, they should have had him go on a rampage with the silver hammer. Oh well.
I do love that Maxwell's Silver Hammer. That's such a happy-go-lucky Paul McCartney song, as he was known to do, and yet the lyrics are so darkly comical because they're about a serial killer, and I'm like, oh, that's great. I was more of a John Lennon person between the two of them, but I will say some of my favorite Beatles songs of all were actually predominantly Paul compositions, including Helter Skelter, and I do kind of like it when he would I liked it when he would indulge his dark sense of humor.
What did y'all think of Max as a character? I don't know why, but Max always reminds me of a character that would have been played by Owen Wilson. I don't know why.
I
always thought of him as an Owen Wilson type character.
He was my least favorite out of our main 6 people.
I really liked him. I mean, they set him up where he could have been this pretentious douche, but he wasn't. He was down to earth. He was really cool. He just wanted to have a little fun and enjoy life. Obviously, his father's pushing him to his parents are pushing him to go to college to be a little puppet like they are and do what they do and don't give a crap what he wants and he doesn't even know what he wants, but they don't want to give him a chance to explore what he wants to do. So I like his character. It's relatable.
Well, I know the real reason why his father wanted him to be in college, and that anger he showed at that Thanksgiving table wasn't just about him wanting to keep him in a box. It was trying to keep him out of a box, one particular box.
Yeah,
Vietnam would have put him in.
that is true. That is a good point there.
Which
Yeah.
was a very well acted scene. A lot of
Oh,
people
yeah, it really
overdid,
was.
but you could see the desperation in the father's eyes.
Yeah.
If you look carefully, it took a couple watches to see it.
Now they were in Connecticut, right?
Now, Jake, you watched the commentary. Am I wrong about that, or did Taymor say no? This was surface level.
Oh, what?
About that argument between Max and his father. Was it about Nam, or did she say no? This was just about the father keeping him down.
They didn't actually really comment on that per se.
Well, keep in mind that America, the United States of America, was sending over military advisors and some little peacekeeping movements, like early to mid 60s. A lot of that stuff was starting under Kennedy, actually. And so you would have seen some of the earliest deployments just in a small level at that time.
And
it really kicked up mid 60s in terms of a draft and everything.
And considering what we're talking about, this has probably taken place over like 5 or 6 years from the start to this point. So,
well, but like you remember, like in Catch Me If You Can, which was early 60s, they mentioned it even then. So it was happening. It was just kind of a slower, more gradual buildup than people necessarily remember. But it was in the cultural consciousness enough to where someone of shout out to Dylan Baker, who's a criminally underrated talent. Shout out, he would have known about that sort of stuff, and he would have known that his son would have been, prime soldier material as far as the draft board was concerned.
Yeah, definitely. It's funny when I was watching this movie again this time, it made me think of the U.S. government being like the Empire. They forced people into the situation, into fighting for them. Basically had no choice but to be in the army and kill the enemies. And the exact same thing the Empire did in Star Wars. So.
Dave, you were trying to say something about Max, I guess. I think that was it.
Max reminds me of like a philanthropist, but he is kind of your typical rich kid dropout, but he has a fun sense of humor, I think. A fun sense of life and freedom. In a sense, I don't know why I keep on thinking of like Les Miserables in this, but there's a young man who leads the revolutionaries in that particular story. That kind of reminds me of his carefreeness of freedom. He wants to shuck all responsibility and live the free life, and find his own way. And unfortunately, he grew up in a time where he had to eat duty for lunch and responsibility for dinner. So,
yeah, he
I think a lot of our parents end up having some of that left over in some of our backgrounds.
Right. Well, I mean, this was basically, he is of that generation. They're kind of like, I guess they don't really get certain things that their parents understand intrinsically about how it wasn't always so straightforward and simple, I guess you might say. And he wants to find his own way. And he does have a good sense of humor about it. He's not really a jerk. He actually is very good to his friends, and a very true friend to Jude, and very true friend to his sister as well.
Yeah, he's a likable character.
And I really love his introduction. I've always loved, even back in the day when I didn't really listen to the Beatles at all, I think probably their first song I really liked was With a Little Help from My Friends. That has always been a favorite of mine. And I love how they do such a rough and rowdy version of it for this. Like, it seems
It's good
like
representation.
yeah, it seems like a bunch of drunk college students out having a good time.
I remember it from Wonder Years. It makes me think of that show every time I hear the song.
Well, and I also love how the most famous cover of the song is by Joe Cocker, and they've got him coming in later for another song that was famously covered. And that was pretty fun. But I love my favorite part in this has always been the part in the bar where the girls are like, the girls show up and go like, do you need anybody? And then, and then one of them, I think it's Max, gets flagged down by this ugly dude at the bar. Could it be anybody? I just thought that was hilarious. It was just, but the way they incorporated the cast into some of these big numbers worked, I think, pretty well, But they talk repeatedly. One thing they did talk about, Taymor and Goldenthal did talk about a lot in the commentary, was trying to build naturally from what was actually going on. And actually, Dane, I think you did yourself a disservice by skipping the musical numbers, because the way Taymor and Goldenthal describe it, they were so woven into the plot that they said there was less than a half hour of dialogue, and they were trying to tell the whole story through the songs.
Oh, I know that. Well, I had keep in mind I've seen this in context before, and part of it's because I was a little short on time. But I know perfectly well that it is woven intricately through the music. I mean, it's told through the music. I'm the guy who listened to the soundtrack obsessively for a long time. So I mean, in any other circumstance, then yes, I would agree with you. But it's like, I think it's an interesting experiment, though, to have run.
Right? Yeah.
It's that you could actually just like skip forward to like the dialogue parts.
Well, no, I was just the way I was watching it when I was skipping forward. I saw visually what was happening, so it wasn't like I did a scene select or anything.
Real quick though, the one thing I do want to inject about this, so you mentioned the soundtrack. I think I've heard the soundtrack to this, or at least parts of it, and there are some good covers, like I said. But the music, from what I understand, the music on the soundtrack was re-recorded for the soundtrack.
Oh yeah, it was.
The vast majority of the vocals in the film were filmed live during the filming of the movie, as if they were just acting dialogue. So there are exceptions to that, but I think they said roughly 90% was filmed live. So there's definitely going to be a rawer, more emotional take to most of these songs if you're watching the movie version.
So let's go ahead and, of course, Max and them, they have the discussion at Thanksgiving. Jude kind of meets up with Lucy. You have a couple of songs in between there where she's all eager to see her boyfriend come back. And I do like that whole thing where, because I know that anybody who can remember back to school always remembers the clock ticking down to the last class.
I like how she's saying a line, and then the teacher just looked at her like, why are you singing in class type thing. And I thought that was a great incorporation of because most musicals, they just kind of ignore the fact that people are singing. Where he looked at her like,
I like that transition to the class, because they've been singing this peppy up tempo, it won't be long, and then they switch to the class watching the clock and those last minute ticking down, and they're all just kind of, it won't be long. And I'm like, what student can't relate to that?
Oh no, I mean, I was a clock watcher, and I did that in work jobs too. Sometimes, especially when it was slow, they always say don't watch the clock. But man, when you're bored, this is the only thing to do.
But yeah, I mean, that was when he was coming back for his final leave before they shipped him out, and of course, you have Jude and them, they come over for Thanksgiving. She meets with Jude. Max and his father have that argument that we talked about. And they decide to do what everybody does on Thanksgiving after an argument. They go bowling.
Indeed.
Yeah, I mean, he mentioned a brothel and what else did he mention? Something else, and they decided on bowling. But yeah, I don't think Lucy would have liked the brothel. So yeah.
She does make a little bit of a face. But Dane, you mentioned some deep cuts earlier. I have to admit, "Fallen" is a song I don't think I had ever heard before I saw this movie.
I've just seen a face. That's
or I've just seen a face. Sorry.
Yeah,
that's from Help.
Yep. That was one I did not know very well.
Song.
And
that
I
was
love
my favorite for the longest time.
The bowling alley sequence is one of the best as far as the dancing and staging of it.
Yeah.
Oh, the sliding down the bowling alley lanes was great too. That was fun.
I can't help but wonder if they took any cues for that scene from The Big Lebowski, but it definitely. Goldenthal described the music in that scene as Zydeco. I always thought of it as more country, but Zydeco is kind of a variation on that. So, Dane, you were talking earlier about how they reevaluated, reimagined a lot of the songs. That I thought was an incredibly fun reimagining.
Yes,
yeah, it was.
And I liked how they did. They managed to fit a lot of different genres in. That was one of the more notable departures from the basic blues rock milieu. But that one, and then of course when we get to Let It Be, that was a notable one as well. But I really like that song, and that scene always made me smile.
And that song used to be my favorite Beatles song. I think it was more because as a kid, I thought it was quite an accomplishment that I could sing the whole thing without getting any lyrics wrong, considering how fast it runs. But it still is there. But I'm going to go to the one that is big, which is Let It Be. Now, Let It Be is, of course, it does have a pretty big following in the communities of color. And
I see it now.
And you could see this, and I'm pretty sure, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Jacob, because she probably does say what year it is. It might be like 1963 or something, but it looks a lot like it's referencing the Detroit riots of 67.
It definitely is referencing the Detroit riots, yes.
So where you get to see the kids singing. And I will admit, every time I see that, I do tear up a little bit, especially after you know what happens.
I should note real quick, you keep talking about the timeline. She did say specifically that there was roughly a 2-year gap that her boyfriend was in the military. So there is a gap in the early parts of the film. It's not necessarily noticeable, but that helps explain the timeline a little bit.
Oh, you need more than just a 2-year gap, because if it happens in 1962, yeah, you're still accounting for like 4 or 5 years. But at the same time, with this, I thought that was a very emotional piece. Okay, what was the relationship? Was it his brother? What was the relationship of the child to JoJo?
I think it might have been his younger brother, because I was thinking child, and I'm like, maybe it was just his younger brother.
Because that's what I thought it was, his younger brother. I wasn't sure if they mentioned it.
It makes more sense that it was his younger brother, because he was definitely upset. I don't know, but he didn't feel like he was a father upset at losing his kid. I think there's a difference. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's his brother. I was thinking the exact same thing when I watched it this time. I'm like, what exactly is the relationship? I'm like, must be his little brother. So
yeah. I wasn't certain if the commentary mentioned what the relationship was.
Oh, did they, Jake?
I don't think they did. Honestly, the commentary had it didn't really comment much on most of the specific goings on of every scene. In fact, it was kind of light. They did a lot of commentary on how the musical and artistic representation of the era was being made in the film.
Yeah.
And they talked on some of the major characters, but they didn't go into a lot of the sad stuff.
And Martin Luther was, I mean, he's the second to last of the main cast that you have that's introduced, which, of course, the last one kind of ties them all together because, well, she really does tie them all together. So, but
She
Martin
really
Luther,
tied the room together.
who plays JoJo, does an excellent job. And, of course, as you said before, Jake, I mean, though I feel like he did an excellent cover of...
Are you talking about introduction to the movie or introduction to the group?
Introduction to the group, but that was I was saying Sadie does tie them all together as a group in a way.
Well, Sadie showed up before JoJo did.
Yeah.
They had already moved to New York and rented the apartment.
Yeah.
I know that JoJo was introduced as a character. That whole Let It Be was before they moved to New York. It's just kind of back and forth with that.
Yeah, when he showed up in New York, she'd already been introduced, but he was introduced at the funeral of his little brother.
Yeah, that's
just like for a split second, you see him with his mother and or I assume it's his mother, looking at the coffin.
And we don't see him again until he arrives in New York for Come Together, which is an excellent piece. But of course, you also have Jude and Max getting an apartment, renting from Sadie.
Right.
Which ties everybody together because everybody's staying with Sadie or hanging out with Sadie, one way or the other.
Yeah.
The final intro of the characters is JoJo's. The one that ties them all together, you could say, is Prudence, because when she comes in through the bathroom window, hey, wink, wink. That was
after JoJo.
Was that?
Prudence comes through the window after JoJo's already there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. She ties it all together because she's the last one of them.
Well, she's the final knot.
Yeah,
but she's the final part of them all getting together.
Sadie ties everybody together, but she's the final.
I see what. Yeah,
Sadie's Sadie because it's her apartment that they all gather.
True.
Yeah,
she's the one who brings them together because it's her place that's there, her band and club that they all go to and hang out at. And with that being said, what are y'all's thoughts on Sadie and JoJo as characters?
Well, they did a good job as representations, her of Janis Joplin and him of Jimi Hendrix.
Yes, they did. Especially in that part where she tries to dress him up and he's like,
Yeah, they were great together.
They were. And again, they're both professional musicians. I mean, he's a professional guitarist and singer. And they both, musically, were excellent, I think, in the scenes they were in. And they both do a really good job acting their parts, too. I think this was the first movie for both of them, or close to it.
Well, JoJo in particular, I have to say, gets an especially great character introduction because we have Joe Cocker doing an incredible version of Come Together, which he had already done an incredible version of with a little help from my friends back in the late 60s. So it was great to get his little sign off on it. But JoJo already gets a great build up, and just given his skill on the guitar and everything, we already kind of know that he's meant to be something of a Jimi Hendrix homage. And later on, once he does his cover of While My Guitar Gently Weeps, oh, that was so good. That's where he really shines in terms of singing and everything.
We should probably mention it because the way his intro really is two-part. It's Let It Be and then Come Together. And again, Let It Be starts with the kid who plays his brother singing more or less a cappella at first. And he does a fine job. I mean, he does a really good job singing those verses. And then you see it intercut with scenes of Lucy's boyfriend being laid to, or people going to that funeral. But you also see people massing for another funeral. And at that time, you hear a gospel choir start to sing Let It Be. And you intercut between the two until you get that great moment where they move aside and you realize the kid is the one in the coffin.
Yeah,
and
that's great.
That whole sequence I thought was just incredible.
Yeah, it was heartbreaking seeing the little kid in the coffin like that.
And it's great hearing that song as a gospel number. It works so well that way.
It was. I mean, I am definitely not a fan of gospel music whatsoever. But there's a few times where I've heard it in different ways that it works. It works well.
Of course, we also have the other introduction where he comes to New York for the first time, and you see Come Together.
And you see Joe Cocker in 3 very different roles scattered throughout the song. And it's really, he's a bum, and then he's a pimp, and then he's a hippie.
I love the bum the best, I think.
I actually love it. I love how when Kim was watching it with me, she's like, "Is that?" She's like, "That's like, no, that can't be him because that's got to be him." I was like, "Wait, no, that's."
I'd actually forgotten he played. I'd forgotten he played all 3 roles. Like I think I knew that, but I'd forgotten it. And I saw him as the bum, and then when I saw the hippie, I was like, "Wait a minute, that's Joe Cocker." But then, like I said, I was like,
everywhere I look, Joe Cocker's there.
So what? Either you or Dane could probably answer this because you probably heard about it in the commentary, and Dane, you might actually know because of an artistic standpoint. But what is with the weird spastic dancing? And you see this a lot. You don't just see this in one number. You see this in multiple numbers. 2 notable would be this one and "Happiness Is a Warm Gun."
Define this.
That one random businessman,
like where you've got that. Well, it's not just the businessman, but then you have the guy who's kind of the drugged out guy. You've got the preacher. You've got several people doing the same style of just spastic, crazy dance.
I'm not 100% sure because they kept talking about naturalistic dancing. And Come Together has those great scenes where like JoJo's walking through the crowd and you see people suddenly duck and turn, or you see like the shuffle. And I just thought that was really cool. But then when you had that one random guy go, like you said, spastic, I was like, okay. Yeah. And what was really funny was Taymor had just finished commenting on the naturalistic movements, and then that guy did that, and I'm like, you could have timed that comment better.
Naturalistic for a drug overdose, maybe, but
maybe. Well, the drugged out guy, it makes perfect sense, like this. But the preacher, I always thought that was a little weird too. Overall, I love that sequence. When we get to Happiness Is a Warm Gun, I love that sequence. But the preacher, that was kind of.
Well,
maybe it was supposed to represent jumping the gun. I don't know.
Well, anytime we get to see Salma Hayek, I'm a happy guy.
5 times.
Well, yeah, for sure. 5 times the fun, you might say.
Yeah.
See,
Conquer's spread out, but we get Hayek all at once.
Well, keep in mind as far as any kind of dancing, whether spastic or not, which probably. Spastic is kind of a derogatory term in the UK. Sorry about that. Keep in mind that the other thing that Julie Taymor is known for, outside of like Frida, outside of Titus, outside of even Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, but like her big accomplishment that is in the pop culture that everyone knows about, whether they know it or not, is the Broadway version of The Lion King.
Right.
And that's extremely colorful, extremely dance and movement heavy, all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, that's a good window into her creative process, into the way that she will conceive of something. So, it could very well be an homage to a specific kind of dance. Nothing rings to mind. Nothing comes to mind, but if it's not, then it's like, well, obviously it's meant to communicate some kind of a feeling, and especially if it's meant to be kind of drugged out, obviously that's fairly straightforward. But I think if you look at it through that kind of Lion King-ish lens, then it kind of makes a little bit more sense.
So, Forrest, you were saying something?
No, I wasn't.
Oh, well, why don't we check with the rest on, since we've got all the characters assembled. For those who haven't either had a chance or haven't spoken yet about the characters, Let's see, like Tammy, Dustin, Forrest. Let's see here, and Dave. What are y'all's thoughts of the characters? If you had any that you wanted to say before we moved on from them, since we got them all here now. All the
Well, for me, it's like, when did we learn their names? Like, they just all kind of blur together for me. Like, I recognize the girl from the beginning, and I recognize the guy, and everybody else just seems to kind of come and go a little too quickly for me to really keep track of.
Same here.
I mean, that's the best I got. Sorry.
No worries.
Same here, although, as I was saying, so, I mean, for me, Salma Hayek was an unexpected cameo.
She was in that?
Yeah,
Yes.
she was all 5 of the shoot.
She was the
bang,
nurses.
bang, shoot
Right.
nurses, and well, that's Julie Taymor does try to kind of keep it all in the family in a sense, because she worked with her in Frida, and then well,
Underrated.
actually, this is the film actually that introduced her to Bono, if I recall, and that's what kind of led to Spider-Man: Turn Off the Dark, at least musically. And so I mean, there's definitely a lineage there, and obviously Elliot Goldenthal was her lifelong romantic, well, not lifelong, but her romantic partner for a good long time, and he's on the score, and so she does have her usual suspects, as it were.
I don't think I could pick Bono out of a crowd if my life depended on it.
Oh, he was the guy on the
Look for
bus.
the glasses.
Well, he was hard to miss as
Dr. Robert.
yeah, Dr. Robert.
Great reference to an underrated song on Revolver.
Right.
Out of all the characters,
Was he
in
that
the
weird
entire-
carnival guy?
No,
He
that
was
was
the
Eddie
one with the
Izzard. He was
glasses.
on the bus.
That was Mr. Kite, which is also
Yeah.
the song they were performing was the song that he comes from.
Yeah. Well,
The guy that they're referring to saying, "I am the walrus."
Well, out of it's funny because out of all the characters in the entire piece, I think Dr. Robert might have been my favorite. Because I liked that he had that right mix of like poetry, but also being kind of jaded, but also being kind of spaced out. He had a good mixture of everything. Kind of reminded me a little bit of like not quite a Timothy Leary, but definitely in that vein. And
Yeah, he
obviously
definitely-
the
I
bus
definitely
is
agree.
an homage to Magical Mystery Tour, of course, and the song "I Am the Walrus" comes from a Magical Mystery Tour, one of my favorite Beatles songs, and that was a more straightforward cover that I thought really worked, just because Bono's voice suits that song very well. And if anything, it gives it a little bit more of a harder rock edge, like a harder psychedelic rock edge. And it suits his voice suits Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds in the end credits, suits that very well too.
And Bono's cover of "I'm the Walrus" definitely did more credit to the song than Oasis version did.
Oh yeah, well it really is like an
Bono's version is definitely up there.
Well, but Bono's cover, I think, is a really ass-kicking version of that song, because the song is not like, it's a psychedelic rock classic, but it's not really known as being all that like hard rocking per se. But the way he does it is like, some of my favorite psychedelic rock songs are the ones that are also like hard rock, if not even getting a little bit into heavy metal. And his version like really makes you want to stomp your feet as you are tripping out. So it covers off both ends of the spectrum,
Of course, before we hit the Dr. Robert scene, we do find out that Lucy's hubby gets shot or killed in Numb, and she ends up kind of fleeing over to where her brother is, especially after she ends up taking to him a letter where he's being summoned by the draft. And of course, I do like how it goes, and he's burning that, and JoJo says, it's like, you may burn that, but you're still gonna have to show up, and that really does lay it down. I was looking at that as it leads later in, and of course you see her say, kind of like the "if I fell in love with you," because she's recognizing her feelings for Jude. as she's kind of staying with them in order to shelter from her own pain of loss. You get to see also a very creepy rendition of "I Want You."
But not
Yeah,
until
I love it though.
not until after they come out from that psychedelic trip. But
Actually, no, it happens because I've seen this.
it-
Yeah, it wants you
psychedelic
right
trip
after he
was-
goes
Right.
when he walks into the
Right.
Yeah.
office
Sorry.
because it shows Uncle Sam saying,
Yeah, I love
I'm
that
actually-
sequence. It's so
I'm actually
creepy
looking at
and
the
weird.
song order.
Yeah. Okay, sorry, I got mixed up. But yeah, you're
That
right. He
happens.
goes in and
Yeah, because
They-
that's examined there, but that is creepy.
and that is Joe Anderson. They were saying on the I don't know how it is on the soundtrack,
Yeah,
but they were saying on the movie they took Joe Anderson, who plays Max, and kind of tripped out his voice a little bit, and he was singing the Uncle Sam parts, the "I Want You," which just kind of adds another sense of eeriness and unreality to that sequence.
And I know that.
Well, I imagine that a lot of young men who were drafted for the army were like mad at Uncle Sam's and for like selecting them to go to war against their wills, you know.
Yeah.
And this comes out of the fear of being forced into this and making a big deal out of going through this medical examination that seems to like take away your humanity, and how all these army men are like the same face, like it takes away like who you are,
Right.
you know? And this faceless army that's taking you up and taking you to another place, and the visuals of these next segments are like, to me, the most powerful part of the film. To me,
there's one visual that I always end up in a disagreement with people, which is I rarely am on this side, and Jake could attest to it, where I'm the one who likes the artistic flourish, and other people are like, no, this is too artsy, it's pretentious. I'm usually the other way around, saying this is pretentious, but that whole thing where they're saying, she's so heavy, and they are marching through the jungle with the Statue of Liberty on their backs.
Right.
That is such a powerful thing, and I know a lot of people who I watch this with like, that's pretentious art bullshit.
Oh, I loved it. I loved it because it's basically, it reminded me of, well, I'm a big fan of like visual embodiments of abstract ideas, number one, in a way that's very, very clear. And this isn't like terribly abstract. Like they make the ideas really clear in a visual image, but that in particular, the way that they use the imagery reminds me of something that I would have seen in like a political cartoon, for example. And if you've ever actually studied the aesthetics of political cartoons, they have a lot of different layers of meaning and ways to communicate what would otherwise be very complex, kind of boring ideas in a way that is visual and if not powerful. So like that kind of put me in that mindset. That whole sequence in particular, the way that they show like a person getting drafted and examined and getting through boot camp and being on the front lines, all that kind of stuff, exceptionally well done.
That
it's
little
a great
slideshow that they show where they just slide different pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah, I was curious, like what you horror fans thought of that segment, because that was
it's
just
wonderful.
Oh, I love that. That was the last time I saw something like that was the remake of House of Haunted Hill, which played that. But I also like how they did that thing, like at the end where he's like, "It's like, so do you have anything to say?" It's like, well, I am a homosexual. What was it? A homosexual. Like drug addict.
Cross-dressing.
The spot on my lung. He's like, Yep,
As long
so
as
you
you
don't
don't have
have
flat
feet.
At least you don't have 5 feet. Yeah.
Then they
And
show
then
him
they
up.
and then they show him wrapped in plastic and they stamp 1A on him. And
Yeah.
Taymor straight said in the commentary that and now he's a piece of meat ready to be shipped out. You know,
Yep.
basically that's
Yep.
pretty much what it was.
And
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
the property. He's the property of the U.S. government now. He's not a person.
and this is
Right.
one thing I want to say about the boomer generation. There are a couple of things that I feel people don't give them credit for that a lot of the younger generations didn't have to deal with. This is something that none of us in the younger generation had to deal with. None of us were forced to go to the Gulf War. None of us were forced against our will to do any of that. These people, can you imagine the fear that you were faced with only a few choices? You either had to go in to what was going to be in your mind certain death, and for many it was. And if it wasn't certain death, you were going to be hurting for the rest of your life and hated by everybody. Then on
Yeah,
top of that,
Yeah.
you
it was
got
a
or
different world. It was a
flee
totally
to
different world
Canada
My
back
father
then.
was
or
in
jail.
Vietnam.
Yeah, I mean, that is I cannot imagine. None of us, I don't think any one of us who are in the younger generations can really understand that level of fear of knowing for certain that that's going to happen. Now, it may change in the future. You never know. But at least for the time being, that is just.
Well, and
And
let's keep in mind also that well, it was a different world back then. It was a harsher world
yeah.
in many ways, and also
Some ways.
well, and it was also a world in which a whole generation was kind of being disillusioned from the values of the previous generation, as far as it's an honor to serve your country, and authority is always right, and that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of disillusionment on that front, but then also like mind consciousness expansion and ideas coming in from the east and that kind of stuff. So a lot of changes, but then also people forget just what a brutal war the Vietnam War was, how brutal the
Nope.
home conflicts were, the conflicts at home, how brutal those were, and how Vietnam was also heavily filmed, heavily filmed in and broadcast on television. Like my dad talked about how he would often see people, soldiers getting shot up, pretty regularly on television at that time.
And
And
that's the
Anybody see Hamburger Hill, the movie?
yeah.
My father was stationed there, and he took me to see the movie, and he said that the people dead in the movie, which there was quite a lot, said nothing compared to how many were dead really there. It was one of the most brutal battles in the Vietnam War. And my dad had a PSD from it, his whole life until he passed away. But I mean, he had to take time off from work sometimes because he just couldn't. Because he'd have flashbacks. I never understood why he always loved watching war movies, though. He always went and took me to like war movies and stuff, which I actually didn't like them mostly. But to me, I would think he'd want to stay the hell away from war movies. But he always watched the war movies, and he didn't really talk about it a lot. Just a little bit, like when we saw that movie and stuff like that. But yeah, you would have really bad flashbacks all the time, and I think he had to take like a month or two off from work one time when he was definitely in his 40s, I think, which is way after Vietnam. So it definitely takes a toll on a person, even if you survive with all your limbs and everything, which he did. You didn't have any issues with physically, but mentally, he was definitely scarred.
well, I
Yeah,
mean, I think about my generation, millennials. We got clobbered by 9/11, the Iraq War, the Great Recession,
Afghanistan,
Afghanistan, all kinds of stuff, kind of
mass
one after
shootings.
the other. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, we've been through the ringer in our own way. I think with the 60s, they had so many changes happen in arguably a more condensed period, because like 9/11 and the Iraq War, Afghanistan, those were kind of one period, and then
let's not
recession was
forget
kind of its own period.
you had a 70s recession, and keep
Yeah.
in mind one of the major differences between those who went in for the Iraq War and those and Afghanistan, and those that went in for Vietnam. Many of the people of Vietnam had no choice. Now, you could say economically, some people had no choice but to enlist,
Yeah.
but I can tell you right now, there are plenty of people who could have economically avoided Nam that had to enlist, whether they wanted to or not.
Yeah. Well,
And
and Vietnam was a much bigger scale war because of that, you know. And we
And-
haven't had a draft since then, although again that could easily change. You don't know.
could.
But
Tammy, you have an interesting story with Vietnam and your dad, correct?
Not really.
Oh, or wasn't it for a war that your dad almost missed a draft?
Well, yeah, I was, because I showed up.
Well, yeah. My father actually would have been right there with Lucy's boyfriend, because he was all about he was patriotic at the time, wanting to go to war, but he was in the opposite end of Max, where they're like, no, flat feet, nope, you're out, you don't qualify, bye. And it's kind of weird how it was in the opposite end of that.
I had an uncle who, other uncles, I can't remember if they were too young or what it was, but the one I'm thinking of, he served, but he volunteered, but he got stationed in Germany. So he volunteered for that, to not have to go to Vietnam, but also to still serve in a different capacity. So he was still, you know, being patriotic, just in a different theater. But that was another way that some people did it.
And that was one of the other differences. I know that one of the questions that came when we watched it was, how can these people who have been through World War II have sent their sons and daughters off to die for
Right.
Vietnam? And I think to myself, well, first off, one, many of them didn't have a choice. I mean, look at Max's parents. Max's parents didn't want him to go off. They were sending him to college to keep him from going. But then at the same time, World War II was propaganded up the wazoo. So people wanted to, the most part, go to war in that one. Whereas they were fighting for a cause. But here it was just broadcast unfiltered to the masses, and people saw.
I still feel like Vietnam, we shouldn't have been there.
People were mad at the government. People were mad at the people who came back from that war and treated the soldiers like crap. Even though
soldiers who were
they
forced
were
to go.
forced into it to begin with. So
they were forced to go and then treated like shit when they got home.
Unwarranted
Baby killers and all kinds of horrible things. And to some degree, maybe some of that was true, but it wasn't like, I don't think most of them, it wasn't something done on purpose or even meant to do. Like, you know, if they did kill little kids or whatever, it wasn't something they did on purpose. You know, it was just little kids would be sent with bombs strapped to them and stuff like that. It was just crazy. We should never been over there. It wasn't a fight at all.
So
yeah,
shortly,
that was an interest. Again, we're getting a little off track here.
Yeah,
but
we
I
can
think
get back
a little
to
bit, just to wrap it up. I mean, I think Vietnam was such a. It's been studied extensively because, well, there's a lot to dive into. I mean, it was the prevailing wisdom at that time was known as containment. In other words, you know, prevent the spread of communism in these other countries before it can take root. And you know, it didn't really work as a political philosophy.
Communism, if they want.
Well, it was a political philosophy that didn't work ultimately. But it was a great disillusionment of, well, that mindset, but then also of, you know, trust in government, trust in authority, and, you know, trust in the idea of warfare and that kind of stuff, which, you know, I think that's part of why the baby boomers are the way that they are, for better, for worse, for neutral, whatever, is just, you know, that's the time frame, the mental framework is that great kind of sense of disillusionment. And inevitably people of my generation we've been, you know, saddled with our own traumas, and inevitably those will manifest as we reach middle age and as we reach elderly age, and who knows what. The time is yet to tell on that, but inevitably those things will come back to bite us in their own way.
Oh yeah, and the younger generations will talk about how terrible we are.
Exactly. That's just
But
how it goes. But the
Apparently
real
Gen Z's
trick.
already- apparently Gen Z's already dunking on us on TikTok.
Oh, I'm sure. But
oh yeah.
that's
Oh
just the
wait,
way.
don't worry. Gen Z's got their time coming. Gen Alpha's gonna be gonna have their
Yeah.
numbers soon.
Well, Gen Z,
Busters.
Gen Z, they think they've got all the answers, and they may on some things, but it's just a cycle. It's how it goes.
Everybody under 25 thinks they know everything until you get about 25, then you realize you don't know anything, and you knew how much more than you did before.
Life kicks you in the ass a couple different times, and then you have to rethink things.
Actually, that's a good
Yeah.
segue to
There
Dear
you go.
Prudence, which speaking about getting kicked in the ass by life, she of course has fallen for Sadie and realizes that ain't going anywhere because Sadie's kind of hooking up with JoJo, and so she locks herself in the closet, which I think is hilarious in that sense, as they sing Dear Prudence to get her out. Of course, she does leave at that point, but it's actually kind of funny. It's like she can't get over me, and that little like that she does.
I love that. Yeah,
Right.
I love that. It was great. Like I think she has a thing for me, or she said it something. It was just great.
Well, here again, we're back before that mystery tour. Then we've got a little ways back, right? Because they really hook back up with her.
It happens like just after, it just happens. This one comes right after the I Want You thing where he goes and gets the examination, and right before the whole mystery tour thing.
Right, because they end up meeting up with her again in the cornfield with the circus thing. But I love I like this version of the song. I like how they all take turns at it. Mm-hmm. Like they really are trying to convince her to come on out. Right. It is a little on the nose that she's in the closet, but it's still the idea that she's locked herself away and they're trying to get to her and let her know, it's well done. But I love the visual when she comes out and the entire room has faded into sky. And they're like
shiny, happy.
I don't know what it is about that effect where they basically fade the room into sky around is Sadie, Max, and Jude are singing to her. Not Sadie, Lucy, Max, and Jude are singing to her, and they just look around and I don't know. I just love that shot. I thought that was one of the more intriguing uses of effects in the film.
Definitely.
And of course, you also start to get hints that Sadie might be going a little bit bigger than normal because she's got a promoter there.
Nice, slimy cameo role by James Urbaniak, the voice of Rusty Venture, among many other things.
And it was kind of there. I mean, at that point, it's just at its infancy. But she's like, I want to get the band on board. And it's like, well, why bother with the band? You're the one who draws the crowds. And that kind of comes back to bite in the second half. I really look at this psychedelic part as a kind of a dividing line. It's kind of almost an intermission. An intermission, so to speak. Between,
it's funny that you mentioned. Well, actually, sorry, finish that thought.
Because I feel like it's I mean, again, it might have been different how she looked at it as the film, but it felt like an intermission, basically sitting in the middle of the film.
They definitely. She saw it split more into three parts. Like the first part is punctuated at the end very harshly by "Let It Be," and that's the first part is innocence. Is like people who. The war is looming, but no one really knows tragedy until that one strikes home for both Lucy and JoJo. They both get it very close to home. And then that starts the second part, she said, was more of a journey of discovery, which is where the psychedelics certainly falls into that. And then the last part, I think, was more of a... I guess the resolution, like the fallout from the choices that they'd made during their journey of discovery, and then trying to bring it back together. So that was kind of the way they had looked at it. But I do agree that like you can kind of look at it either way.
I mean, art's about interpretation, and I think it
Yeah.
was Mark Twain that even said that once art leaves his hands,
Right.
it's not about what he thinks; it's about what everybody else thinks, and
Right.
that can be there. I mean, to me, it looks like a 5-parter deal with this being
Yeah.
that intermission in the middle.
Right.
But
Yeah, you could almost say the mystery tour is an intermission. I think that's a pretty good way to describe that.
it feels like it really does feel like one because it's so different and weird and disjointed.
Psychedelic.
And I
It's
mean, they go
trippy.
into this party of this dude that's sort of like a mixture between Andy Warhol and a couple other weird things, and it just is a weird psychedelic thing. But I'll let y'all talk about that.
We should also mention another one of the artists behind the camera was the camera person Bruno Delbonnel, who has done some really impressive camera work for the Coens and for other people. And he and his team, Taymor said that in this scene in particular, she told them to just go crazy. Like they, especially when they're on the bus, they were using like solarization effects. They were speeding film up, slowing it down, doing weird camera angles, just doing whatever they felt like. And they kind of edited the best of it into the film, I guess, was their approach. So I guess if you're going to do a psychedelica, that's a pretty good way to go about it.
Yeah, well, being a huge fan of psychedelica itself, and particularly films of the late 60s, early 70s that get into that, my favorite parts of the movie, in terms of the visuals and the filmmaking, definitely are in the middle, just because that is where they get really crazy with it. And they do try all kinds of different things, different filters, different ways of expressing an idea. Like you get 3 in a row. You get I Am the Walrus, you get Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite with some blue meanies from Yellow Submarine thrown in there for good measure, which is pretty cool. And because with the underwater sequence, I was like, oh, that's brilliant. That was one of my favorite Beatles songs, because on Off of Abbey Road. And that one really does put you in this kind of tripped out consciousness expansion kind of state of mind. And I think those 3 right in a row are really good at making you feel a good trip, I suppose, is what you would say. It's kind of it's the same level of psychedelic craziness as something like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, but that was all bad trips pretty much.
Yeah.
And this was more like what a good trip would be like, presumably. I've never had either one, but I would
I
assume
have.
if it were to happen, it would be more like that, more blissful, more
I had the
imagine.
bad kind.
Yeah, you had a bad kind.
I had the bad kind.
How
I
was
gotta
it?
wonder.
Was
what
it
would
more Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas ish?
No, I thought my best friends were trying to kill me, and I already killed my friend's girlfriend.
So
Okay.
And I also thought the house was trying to kick me out.
Huh.
Well,
Not
I
a
wonder
person,
what
the
this.
house. The house
Brandon
got freaked
Brandon
out.
will be offended. Talking about horrifying things, Brandon will be offended that I will always associate Because with American Beauty.
Yeah. Well,
But anyway,
that film offends me on multiple levels. But
one sequence that did not strike me. It struck me as weird as shit the first time I saw the movie, and it has grown on and is waxed and waned over the years. When I look at the film for its artistic pretensions, I don't like it as much, and when I like the art, I really do like it. And right now, I'm in the camp of do liking it. Is the Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite sequence, which you got Eddie Izzard dressed to the hilt as Mr. Kite, and it is such a weird, tripped out sequence. It's just,
I love it.
it's weird.
I laugh
I
every
don't
time
think
he's
I've
like
seen that
in
in a movie.
things. The way he says in things, I crack up laughing every time. I just
And
watched 2 alternate versions of it on the DVD, and just cracked up laughing both times I watched those 2 versions after watching the movie, and laughed at the original, the version, the lyrical version. So
and
I don't know. I just find it is super trippy, but I just enjoy it. The whole thing, the blue minis, everything, the way Eddie Lizard does the whole act. It just, I think it's perfect, and it's goes great with the song, and it feels like a real tripped out music video. But it's my thing. I really liked it. I really thought it was cool.
And I know, actually, I am 100% certain now that my first time watching it was at the Bird with you, Jacob, because I remember one of the first disagreements we had about the film, which was the only thing I did not like about the film, was Eddie Izzard's version of this. I detested it, which because I was a big fan of the original song, and I just felt like it ruined the pacing. Now I actually can say I've come around to it. I don't love it, but I definitely appreciate the imagery, and I understand what they're going for with it, which I admit I was a little bit less, which is weird because I loved every other aspect. I love the because that they were doing afterwards,
Right.
which I still say Alice Cooper's cover of that is the best part, is the best version. But
I
still,
find it. You mentioned the pacing. Like, the pacing was one of the biggest things they changed about a lot of the songs.
yes,
Yeah.
Changing the tempos up or down was a big thing they did with this.
to me it felt disjointed entirely.
A
which
little
is-
bit. Yeah.
which is where it was, and it was on purpose. But at least to my knowledge, that's what I felt it was.
Yeah, sure it
And-
was.
But I've gotten to where, I mean, like I say, you can evolve your opinions on it. It's been
And
15
I do love the end of that. I do love the end of that as they're walking, because of course they see Prudence in there and they're like, oh, there she is. And as they're walking out, she walks unafraid up to Sadie without any problem. And then, and then she grabs this girl behind her. Here, I want you to meet Rita. She's a contortionist.
and a meter maid.
That's a great scene.
It was like she hit the jackpot almost.
Right?
But it's one of the things I feel bad about Prudence, because I felt like she got glossed over when there was a much more interesting story to be told. But they kind of ended her story arc there. She comes back at the end, but she really does reach her happy ending like right there. And that was the end for her up until she comes back.
Yeah. She looks
That could have been a whole movie.
extremely happy at the roof too, so it seems like she's still super happy. She doesn't seem like the Prudence that we saw in the rest of the movie, the sad girl.
Yeah. I was a big fan of that whole sequence. Like, it's just so weird, and it kind of stops the movie dead, but like in a good way.
Right.
What do you think, Dustin? Do you think that sequence would be a good consideration for an intermission style?
I mean, it basically was.
Yeah. Well, it only goes downhill from here.
Well, yeah, because segues directly into Vietnam, and Max. Yeah.
It's I gotta say, Because has always been a creepy song. And there's only two good things that came out of the film Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. One was the Alice Cooper cover of Because, and the other was the Aerosmith cover of Come Together. Everything else in that movie was a terrifying disaster. But in a good way, I guess you could say.
I don't think I've seen it. I know I saw Yellow Submarine, but I don't think I've seen that one.
Well, we should cover it one day here. If we ever do like bad films, like just something that's bad, that should be up.
I'll probably like it, knowing me, but
But yeah, that Because it's such a creepy song. The way that they do it, the harmony, it is just, and it was really well done while they were doing that.
Yeah, I loved everybody underwater. They're like semi-nude or whatever. It was a very like. Another reason why I'm a big fan of the movie is because I have a deep love for movies that feel like moving paintings or look like moving paintings. And there's like a select few films, like modern films, that really fit that category. This is one of them, especially that sequence. Like I could easily see like nude or semi-nude figures underwater doing some of the like embracing and
Right.
that kind of stuff that they were doing there. I could easily see that as a painting on someone's wall, or in a gallery somewhere, like that had a lot of I guess maybe else because I'm a huge fan of the ocean, and because I grew up in Monterey, California, so I love the ocean deeply. Deeply. See what I did there? But that whole thing, I was like, yeah, that connects with me on a important emotional level.
And then it's appropriate what you say that the film has several scenes that look like that, because Taymor was a great fit for Frida. She does have a wonderful visual flair, and she knows how to frame a scene like that. But that was one of the scenes, the underwater part, she said was filmed in a pool, and that was, of course, one of the scenes where they used an overdub, because obviously they weren't being recorded singing that. But she said she gave them props because they were underwater with their eyes open, mouthing the words underwater. So that, that's takes some doing. And she said that the opening part of Because, where they're laying in the field in that starburst pattern, she wanted to have a shot like that because she thought it was like emblematic of that era. And it was one of the first things they filmed, apparently. And apparently the original version had Harrison McCartney and Lennon overdubbed 3 times each for a 9-part harmony.
Yeah.
So they had 9 actors there, each singing a part, so they could replicate that, which I thought was kind of an interesting way of doing it.
Yeah, if any of you have not heard that one's on Abbey Road, and that one, if any of you haven't heard, because it is worth a listen because it is creepy.
I think
very well done.
I think it's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful song. It
can be creepy and beautiful at the same time.
Yeah, well, it's and it can also be kind of otherworldly, and that's also why I like that sequence. Because
that's the word I go with.
Well, I like
it
that
has otherworldly for me.
Well, and that's why I like that sequence in particular, because it has a creepiness to it, but a beauty and an otherworldliness. And I mean, you go down deep enough in the ocean, it practically is another world down there. So, I mean, it captures that very, very well. And I also like the mystery in those lyrics, love is all, love is you, that whole thing. I feel like that it's is cryptic enough, but you can interpret that in a creepy or beautiful way, or a beautifully creepy way, however you want to say it. Those are some of my favorite Beatles songs, are the ones that are multiple things at once.
It's fun that you guys are emphasizing the creepy aspect of this, and because one of the things that was mentioned is that this is almost, I think there may have been one other song, but for all intents and purposes, this is as close as we get to a love duet between our 2 leads.
Well, it doesn't last for long. Matter of fact, it stops right there, because we start to see a schism in our love, because you've got a kind of a dichotomy that forms. You've got our little you've got Jude, who's working more inwardly, trying to find himself, as he is kind of separated from all of this, because he's kind of a nobody. He's not in his home country anymore, but yet he's not at home in the United States.
He's kind of a nowhere man.
Exactly. There you go.
In his nowhere land.
Making all his nowhere plans for nobody.
You've also got. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Carl.
I was just joking, saying he was the ape man and he's the walrus. Cuckoo.
We've also got like Lucy, who is dealing with a lot of guilt in a way, feeling like she is part of the problem. So she's trying to be part of the solution, where she's had not only one person who has died in the war, but another that she is close with whose life is risked all the time. So she ends up throwing herself into the peace movement, uh, towards which, you know, you get to see a lot of that. You get to see a couple of those big things. You could see the one in Colombia and all that building up, but that kind of separates them because she's throwing everything into that, and this guy that's leading it, who is there, and of course Jude is skeptical about it, which he should be, because a lot of these people tended to do that, to use the women.
He was right. There was a lot of women, so it definitely seemed, even if the guy wasn't doing that, it definitely seemed like he was doing something like that. I love that laundry scene.
Yeah, that's
She's
another.
just like, you'll never know what it's like to be drafted, and he's like, you and neither, you know, because she's a girl, and
Yep.
you know,
Yeah.
it was,
But
you know,
therein is the guilt that
they
a lot
break
of
each other down
yeah.
somewhat, and you know, it was an interesting fight, and you know, I enjoyed watching it, and not that I wanted them to fight, because I think the couple were great, but you know, every great couple is going to fight, so I think it was a very interesting.
That was part of, I think, one of the interesting finds from my little experiment, because you're less overwhelmed by the spectacle of it, because like I'd seen those sequences several times, know the songs by heart and all that, so you kind of focus in a little bit more on some of the character dynamics in some of the lesser talked about scenes, and also particularly at this stage in my life where I'm at now, because I've kind of been there, as far as like, you know, there are people who have like very personal stakes in whatever activist cause they're trying to be involved in, and for them it's a deeply personal thing, and so they're going to dive into it, you know, completely, and for perfectly understandable reasons. And then you have people that, you know, don't disagree with it per se, but they have their skepticism, and also just a deeper sense of like feeling alienated, and in his case he is, you know, because he's technically an illegal alien, feeling alienated, but also feeling alienated in a artistic sense, in a personal sense, in the sense of like wanting a deeper connection with another person, and they're getting too wrapped up in their own work, that sort of thing. So it's like that part of the story in particular, I was like, yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now in my life, as far as like, you know, you're wanting to become a better artist and kind of, and a better person, kind of find out just who you really are and what you're really made of amidst all this chaos around you, and also people that you love going off in different directions, and where do I fit in with all this, and you know, is there a place for reasonable skepticism in a way that isn't just fence sitting, you know what I mean?
Actually, you just used a phrase that going in different directions is kind of the two of them are traveling. They're traveling almost polar opposite paths, and they meet at the middle, and it's wonderful in the middle, and then they just keep traveling past each other. Basically, like, he comes from the working class. He's poor. He never knew his father. He was an only child, so he didn't really have a family. You know, he's got a few blokes he hangs out with. He's got a girlfriend, you know, but he's basically a working stiff who is just getting by until he comes to America. And after making a sort of peace with his father, he is able to basically, okay, I can do what I want. I will do what I want. And he is going from a lifetime of burden to freedom. And she is coming from a very privileged upbringing, middle class family. She's not really had to deal with much in her life. And slowly but surely, she's becoming a much more aware person of her surroundings, of her duties, of her, you know, she's basically trying to get to a point of taking responsibility for her privileged youth, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
And the two of them just don't really quite get that about each other. You know, they really like each other on a personal level, and they really, you know, but he doesn't understand her obsession with wanting to have more to worry about. And,
Well,
and
well,
she thinks he's just being flippant and not caring, you know?
yeah, when
Look
and
at
someone like her would inevitably accuse him of fence sitting and that kind of stuff, which that's what I found that whole middle section there I found really, really interesting this time around, just because it's like, you know, you can have your free love, your, you know, consciousness expansion, etc. Then there's also the business of like living together as a couple, just getting through the day. And oftentimes that's where
Mhm.
couples are made or broken. And
Yeah.
in their
That's
case,
true.
they're kind of drifting apart. And now again, it does kind of speak to their why, like you summed up very clearly why they think the way that they do and why they go off on their different paths. I think her story in particular, you could easily read one of two ways, because I am sure there are a lot of people, and let's just, you know, say young girls in particular, who probably grew up that exact way, and they kind of finally wake up and realize, oh yeah, I have been overly privileged in my life, and I haven't realized the suffering of other people of whatever sort in whatever way. So I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to be part of the solution, etc. And, you know, perfectly noble thing to do. And I'm sure they're, you know, they're doing it for sincere reasons and all that. Then there's the other way you can read it, which is, you know, privileged, spoiled white girl, what do you know about any of this stuff? And you know, and to be fair, she is down there doing the work and everything.
Yeah.
So she's definitely got the street cred, quite literally. But then the danger that is posed with that is exactly what Jude brings up, which is that, you know, people who are, you know, bad actors, shall we say, will take that idealism and radicalize it and turn it into, you know, bombs and violence. And well, that's kind of what happened to that's where somebody like a Charles Manson could come along in the at first the San Francisco area, and then he moved down to Hollywood. You know, somebody, he wasn't the only one who was like that, kind of taking advantage of people like that. But the Manson family murders were the more famous example of that sort of thing, culminating in a very, very bloody, awful way. But I just liked that you could easily look at both of their motivations, and you could see a good version of why they were doing what they were doing, as well as a not so good version of it. Because with Jude, you could easily say, "Oh, you're just being a pretentious artist. You're just fence sitting. You're not acting. You're part. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem." You know, you could easily read it that way too. So everybody's got good and bad versions of why they're doing what they're doing.
I
I
do
do think. Oh, go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
I do kind of like how when she goes up to the apartment in which those activists are building like the bombs, she's like, I thought it was the other side who dropped the bomb.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's
Well, that's
when
when she gets
dropped-
disillusioned with
left.
them at the end. Yeah.
Yep. That's when she realized that they were not the people she thought they were.
Even before that, I think that Jude knew that there was something coming. As you
Well,
could
Jude
see,
knew, but she didn't.
well, I mean, something when he is singing that, you can tell because of the melancholy feeling it brings. And you've got that, and it's paired with the one that comes right after, which is where JoJo and Sadie have their split, where they're doing that.
Oh,
where they're saying,
darling.
"Oh, darling," and
Yeah, I love that.
because JoJo realizes
That was great.
that she's going to leave him behind, and she's like, "No, it's not like that." And they just, it is really, you can see the fight as it plays through in song, and it is pretty impressive.
Well, and that's a very real problem too, especially with, well, any kind of couple, but especially anybody that's in kind of a competitive artistic medium like either music or acting or whatever. You know, the saying, or which and the quote from the first Shrek movie is, "Celebrity marriages, they never last, do they?" Well, there's a reason why. Is because you have to be very highly competitive and focused on your work, and if you're diverging in that way, then that's going to cause friction, and, you know, that's a problem. And they speak to that very, very effectively.
And of course, one of the more effective songs in this artistically is "Strawberry Fields," where you can see him. He's also working, of course, on Sadie's company's art play, because he's finally got his artistic piece. And of course, Lucy's like, look, there are bigger things than that out here.
Yeah.
And that's not quite where the schism fully goes, but it might as well be there, which
Well,
follows up by Revolution.
that also
Strawberry
shows
Fields,
their diverging
yeah.
views of life, because again,
Yeah.
on a
Yeah, she stopped
symbolic
caring about his art and
well, and on
only
a
cared about.
symbolic level, though, you could argue that, in fact, the strawberry, especially in the context where Strawberry Fields Forever, where that's used, where the redness of the strawberry is sweet and delicious as it is, it's also very bloody and raw, as
Right.
Max was experiencing it in the war. So they
Yeah.
showed the duality of that symbol very nicely. So you could read it that other way, of like that symbol being right on the money, in fact. Which and side tangent there, once the Beatles wanted more control over their music, when they were still trying to kind of get their shit together after Brian Epstein died, their company was Apple Corp. So we got another fruit of a different sort, but it is an apple instead of a
Right.
strawberry. But that's another Beatles tie right there, and
And
that
they kind of play with it, with him trying to do an Apple logo and just no, this just isn't working.
Yes.
Yeah, which that's a little cute, because for the longest
Yeah.
time there was a legal battle between Apple Computers and Apple Corp.
Of course there was.
And eventually they settled it, and then the Beatles catalog came to iTunes, and it was a huge deal. But
I
it was
remember
I do. That was on the nightly news. I'll never forget it. But yeah, it's an interesting thing. But yeah, that whole middle section I do think is incredible, and particularly when it leads into Revolution, which was I'm always conflicted about if I like the single version just called Revolution, or if I like the slower version called Revolution 1 on the White Album. I like them both. It just depends on what mood I'm in. That's one of my favorite Beatles songs, any way you slice it. And I do find it kind of amusing. Again, we talk about contradictions here with the Beatles themselves, because like Paul is always known for doing some of the happier, lighter, Beatles songs, the ones that John would derisively refer to as grandma music towards the end of their time together. And yet a lot of his songs, he had some of the darker, more sardonic songs, like Maxwell Silverhammer, like Why Don't We Do It in the Road, some of those ones that had a darker edge than you would expect. Then here comes John Lennon, which that was mostly a John Lennon composition with Revolution. And he was like the big, peace and love, give peace a chance activist type. But then Revolution's coming along and saying, just take a step back, just think this thing through a little bit, it's if anything, it's kind of skeptical about some of the crazier aspects of Revolution and that kind of stuff. And so again, I think that's I like those pieces that don't quite fit on,
And even the way that the song is incorporated in the film, I love it. Like Brandon was saying, the break probably happened in Strawberry Fields. I think that was the pulling apart. The break was Revolution, where he came in and straight up punched out Paco. But
that was his Travis Bickle moment right there.
Right. But I do love the idea.
Was the start of the big issues where it was boiling up. And then the boiling point and boiling over was him coming in and bunching.
Oh yeah.
But basically, the song, it's called Revolution, of course, and he comes in. It's an angry entrance he makes into that scene. It's an angry entrance, and he is definitely barely suppressing his rage throughout. But he is, at the same time, that plea for peace is coming through. He is he is trying to tell them, all of them gathered, you don't need to be radicals here. He
Yeah.
is trying to do
You
that.
don't need to cause violence to stop violence.
Exactly.
Well,
And
that's
him
what I'm
punching
saying. Like he's
punching
not.
Paco had more to do with him thinking Paco was a womanizing douche
Right.
than
Right.
anything else.
Then
Well,
he's
that's what
talking
I.
in peace, and then he hits him. But
Well, and that's what I admired about Jude this time around is that he can see some of the potential pitfalls in the way of this thing, and he's not against what she's trying to get across, but he's also saying, this thing
Just
could
the
go
way-
bad. Well, then
the
this
way
thing
he
could go
thinks that
bad
out.
really quick, and
Oh,
in
yeah.
fact, it does. So I did appreciate that.
Even when she's on the phone with her mother and saying, "Oh, everything's all right," and then something smacks against the telephone booth and she can't get out, and there's the army's like forcibly taking people down, and shit's gotten real there. I mean, she probably should have gotten out then, but she doesn't.
I mean, with the whole thing, you've got that revolution. They end up kind of splitting up, and meanwhile, you also have JoJo with, in my opinion, an even better rendition of "When My Guitar," "While My Guitar Gently Weeps" than the original.
Well, as Jude is leaving, he stops by and sees the news reports about Dr. King on the TV, and then we cut to JoJo. Yeah, that's a great scene.
I like that scene a lot because that's one of my favorite songs. One of my
Mine
guitar gently
too.
weeps.
And he performs it really well.
Oh,
When I was young, I had two favorite songs that were not in the movie at all.
He does it very well. He's got such the right voice for it. It just sounds beautiful.
Well, and that was I mentioned, so that most of the Beatles catalog is credited to Lennon McCarthy, even if one of them did most of it, if not all of it. That's just how it worked. That was how the writing partnership went. And then later half of the Beatles' careers when George Harrison really started to flex his songwriting muscles, and that's one of his best compositions was "While My Guitar Gently Weeps," and this particular version of it really kind of hones in on a bluesier origin to that type of song in a more real way than I think even the original did, as much as I love it. So yeah, very, very impressive.
I think how they slowed it down and how they did it
Yeah.
in the movie was just perfect. The way, because we've said throughout the whole movie how the arrangements have been changed here and there.
Right.
The songs have been changed, and I think how they did this particular song was perfect for what that when they did it.
Well, it's very, very heartfelt, very raw. I mean, this is a very emotional film. Big emotions of all different sorts. Big love, big hate, big sadness, big distress, that kind of thing. Then this definitely gets down in the depths in a good way.
And this one also fits on multiple levels. A lot of the songs do. I mean, quite a few of them do. Kind of like you were just saying, but like on the surface level, given the timing and everything, it really seems like it's a ballad partly for Dr. King, but also just generally the tragedies of the time. But as they Taymor and Goldenthal did point out in the commentary, and I feel like I'd gotten this myself, but they made a point to say it, that it's also very much JoJo mourning the loss of his relationship with Sadie. And it also comes at a perfect time for Jude to be right in the exact same emotional space. And you see the two of them leaving the bar together. And so that really does help. That's like a bonding moment for them, too. Yeah.
And it leads directly into Across the Universe, where he's realizing she's left and he's on his own.
Where's Sadie?
He ends up, of course, Jude ends up finding Lucy during that. And of course, I'm not sure. Helter Skelter, I believe, factors into the actual protest, if I recall correctly.
Right.
Arrested while trying to save Lucy from that fate.
Yeah.
And you can see, because they're trying to, because they know that in Colombia you had a bunch of those professors there that are being used for the Defense Department. And they're trying to get at those people, and they are not successful and end up having mass arrests. And as the protests get more and more intense, it's an amazing thing. And that's one thing. I mean, I look at things, and again, in that generation, there was no stop to the protest. There was no, okay, we accomplished a small goal, let's just go home. This they kept going because they knew that was the only way. They
Well,
kept going. They kept,
I think we, that hasn't changed much. I mean, people,
Eh,
tend to go
I
all the way with things.
I
in
would
the
be willing
nation.
to. I'd be willing to bet, because I look at a lot. The last time I seen something that's lasted more than that hasn't petered out with the attention span of the people was maybe Occupy Wall Street, and that's been.
That petered out relatively fast.
That
I mean,
petered
I
out
think,
like right away. Like
Yeah,
But you look at those. I mean, that I hate to say, even the Black Lives Matter stuff that petered out within a year. That's the thing. Is that
Well,
most
no,
of those.
that stuck
no.
around. That
Yes,
one stuck
yes and-
around.
yes and
Occupy Wall
no.
Street fizzled out.
But that's the thing, is it's not. It's most of these things tend to fizzle out with the times. They go to this. Oh, we've changed this. It's good enough, and then we move on to the next news cycle.
Mhm.
This was just solidly on one thing for years.
Well, and let's also keep in mind the Vietnam War was a longer, more sustained, singular event. So that's a little bit of a different circumstances. And that's not, something like what a Black Lives Matter would be talking about. That's less of like a necessarily is less of like a singular sustained event.
And I'd say it's too
I would say
early.
it's many points of sustained events.
That's
Not
what
at
I- yeah,
the
that's
level
what-
that it has been. I mean, 2020 it was a sustained event, but
that
it's
yeah,
not
that
at
was
the 2020
that was a
level
flash
now.
that was a flashpoint kind of event there, but it was
Yeah.
you get what I'm saying. Like a war is
Yeah.
like that's a long period singular
Right.
event that goes on for
Well,
who knows how long.
And one could make the argument that those events are happening every day, all day for the other.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but I can say that but to say that the levels are the same as they were in 2020, that is a total lie. There is
but
still
also
a
and also
yeah.
keep in mind with these particular protests and this time period, like there was not 24-hour news, there was no social media, there was no internet to
Well, yeah,
look things
that's-
up. So like whatever issues of the day would get picked up by like 3 news channels, newspapers, whatever, and they'd hammer it home, because that was what was going on that people could realistically report about. So
Right.
you could get people rallying behind. People didn't necessarily have their pet causes nearly to the niche degree that they do now. And you can get mad about anything you want
yes.
anywhere in the world because of the internet. Back, you could get not to say that people don't still, people can fill the National Mall about whatever, nowadays if they want, but it just, you can get hyper specific if you want, or you can get really, really general if you want, but that particular time period is people's the lens through which they view it is more a singular event. The closest that I saw to that in my lifetime was probably the Iraq War, because that dominated every nightly
Yeah.
news, every headline for years and years and years, because it was a big deal.
And there were protests. The
Yes, there
problem
were.
was that the protests died down within a few years. There were still protests, but nowhere near the size.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
whereas in this war, it intensified. It was intensive. It got worse and worse.
Yeah. Well, the war itself intensified, so
well,
thus the protesting intensified, and
All right. It was like, yeah.
and even then even like under Nixon with the bombing of Cambodia and everything like that, that escalated protests in a different way, because then all of a sudden we were in Cambodia when we didn't when people are like, "Why are we there? You know, why aren't we? Haven't we brought everybody home yet? You know." So it was, yeah, things didn't quiet down after Johnson, didn't run again.
But as things went, Jude got arrested and, of course, deported. But his father did come in to keep him from being, charged with anything other than, hey, you're here illegally, bye bye. Which was,
Well, he tried to keep him in the country too. He said he was his
Yeah.
doctor. He just didn't have any proof of it.
nope,
Right.
no
They-
DNA
they
testing
do
back
a blood
then.
test back then.
They did get to essentially make their peace, which
Yeah.
was a nice scene. Yeah.
But then everybody's favorite with Selma Hayek comes up after that, where we get to see Max coming back from the war injured, and them doing "Happiness is a Warm Gun," which is also really really good use of that song.
Yes.
One of my favorite Beatles songs, and my favorite Beatles album is the White Album, and the majority of the songs in this do come from the White Album. I tallied it up, so
Well,
Julie
that's
Taymor,
also a double album.
Julie Taymor's got good taste. I will say that. And then also, in regards to Salma Hayek, if I may borrow an Animaniacs line, "Hello, nurse."
Yeah, indeed. She was the physical. There are very, very few women alive. But anyway,
she will make you
She's the
feel
nurse that
better.
everybody wants.
and they definitely sexed her up for this one. They sexed her down for Frida,
Yeah.
which is appropriate. But that was a passion pick that I think she approached Taymor to direct, if I remember correctly. But I do believe, if I remember correctly, that the two of them became and remained friends.
Yeah.
And when Taymor was making this film, I love that little anecdote. Apparently, she mentioned it in the commentary, but I'd actually read about this long before. I think it was on the IMDb commentary, where Taymor was thinking about having Hayek come in for this scene to be one of the nurses. And she's like, so she asked her, she's like, yeah, I'm thinking about, would you like to be one of the nurses in this scene? And Hayek's like, just one? Or something like that. And like, she was the one that suggested that, why don't I just play all of them? And apparently it made it much more difficult to shoot the scene, but they had fun with it. Of course, I had fun with it.
Salma Hayek, I have to just, again, very short side rant. Salma Hayek is a criminally underappreciated actress when it comes to drama and comedy.
Oh yeah,
and she's done some risky things. Like, she's been involved in Dogma, a highly controversial
that
film.
is one of my favorite comedies and one of my favorites of her.
I love her in that, and also she was in Sausage Party as well. I mean, she will go way out there and do some batshit
It's
crazy
a lesbian
things.
taco.
Once you go taco, you never go baco. But it's she will go out on a limb and do some batshit crazy things, and God bless her, because we need people who are willing to do that and also be fun on screen, and really get into the spirit of the thing, whether it's serious or whether it's comedic or whatever. And and she's easy on the eyes as well. But
well, that's putting it mildly.
Yeah.
And of course, I think she did get maybe her only. I'd have to check, but she did get an Oscar nod for Frida, and I think that was her only one.
Yeah, she's gotten a lot of Razzie nominations that I do not think she's deserved. And that, I think, was her only Oscar nod for Frida.
I do believe fully, though, you're talking about being criminally overlooked. Her co-star in that film, Alfred Molina, he was robbed.
He's an underrated actor in general, but that's another story.
So, again, very well illustrated. I mean, they only kind of touched on a bigger issue, but I felt like, just like us with this discussion, they were kind of running out of time, it seemed, because it's something that I could feel like they would have had a good opportunity to discuss more in a longer film.
Well, and
Um,
also they did make a point in the commentary of saying, and that's one of the reasons why I thought about stepping up a little more on the side stuff. They wanted to focus mainly on the relationships.
Yeah.
They used the era and the events as the backdrop and the things that infused these characters and informed them. But the movie was not about any of this. PTSD, the Vietnam War, or the riots, or it wasn't about that. It was about living through those times.
So, and of course, you then also go through the rendition that Evan Rachel Wood sings of Blackbird with
Another great
Max
song.
sitting there just kind of at that place where they had the little art scene at the beginning where the officer just happened to be hanging out in the burned out building. But
the place where all the characters, they mention in the commentary that they all come together. Well, technically right after Come Together. But Come Together kind of weaves them all together during the course of the song. You even see Prudence. She just joins the group a bit after. But Blackbird is the point where they're all scattered. You know, even though Max and Lucy are right together, he's a million miles away.
Yeah.
So it's
well, as he says later on.
Very appropriate song for that kind of emotion too, because the song, a lot of people don't necessarily know this, but Paul McCartney's talked about it quite a lot, that the song has a civil rights connection to it. Insofar as taking one's broken wing and learning to fly, amidst hardship and all that. It has an explicit civil rights connection, but taking that aside, you can also look at it just in a more general way of oftentimes that is what we have to do in life. We get our wings broken, have to learn to fly again despite all that, and that's what our characters are having to do at that moment, because life has pretty soundly kicked them in the ass in quite a number of ways, so that's what you have to do in life, is you have to pick yourself back up again.
And that's where the lowest part kind of ends, and it starts to go back to the with Hey Jude, we start to make it better, as they say. As they have this again, there are a lot of really interesting songs where you've got Jim Sturgis and Joe Anderson kind of working off each other, and they really do a great job of it. And this is one of those. I love how they have the two kind of different. You got the bar that Max is at, and of course the pub that Jude is at, and it's really a great thing. And of course, ending it with him coming back to America, getting that officially documented there, and making it back to the United States with Max, doing that like final part of the song, just all celebrating him coming back. And that was just a very excellent way of welcoming him back, getting people back together.
Right. Kind of literally getting the band back together.
And that really does, and it leads them to the top of the building with the rooftop concert with Don't Let Me Down, where you've got most of them there. And then All You Need Is Love, where you finally get Jude and Lucy reunited again. And then everybody is together at the very end.
Give them credit also that they saved, as you would expect, knowing the Beatles catalog and everything, they saved some of like the big showstoppers. The one that if you were to play this all in a concert, you would save these to the very end. You'd end on you do what they did, which is put Hey Jude not at the very end, but close to it, and you end on All You Need Is Love, as like your big climactic, finisher. Because, duh, of course you're gonna do that.
And then you got Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds as the encore. So.
Or like in that case, end credits. But it's like and that one actually makes a good amount of sense for where they place
Right.
it.
Yeah, because they had
But,
no
like-
place really in the movie to put it, even though they had Lucy.
Yeah.
They
Well,
they
but-
found a place for Hey Jude, but
But
Oh.
those fit that section of the narrative very, very well, and even how they use All You Need Is Love is very like. My favorite part of that is when it's just Jim Sturgis, just the mic, kind of a singular voice rising above the chaos, above the everything. I think that was very powerful before everybody joins in, of course, but it's like, and of course, the rooftop concert aspect is very explicit, but like just that whole idea of like a lone voice amidst the chaos, I think that really resonates. And then of course everyone comes together and everything's right with the world. But I
He's
think that
essentially a beacon to
exactly. Well, because
together.
that is what that song is about. I mean, one could read it very cynically as far as it's a lot more complicated than that. That's not all you need, blah blah. But the whole message of All You Need Is Love is exactly what it says. There's nothing you can make that can't be made. All that kind of stuff. It's basically. I think it's actually very appropriate where they place it, not just for the climactic aspect of it, but also because if you were to hear those lyrics just on their own without all the pain that preceded these events, you could accuse it of being kind of platitudinal and simple. But then it's the fact that they come at that place of love and coming back together after having experienced all that pain that makes it more powerful.
That is almost exactly the way that they put it in the commentary. They were like, we knew this song had to be in the movie, but we didn't want to play it too soon. We wanted it to be earned, basically, was what they said. And I think they did. By saving it till that moment, they kind of earned what may have come across as platitudes.
Yeah, because like you hear that sentiment, All You Need Is Love, like you could see that on like somebody's bumper sticker, and then you roll your eyes at it, and that kind of stuff. That's the temptation to think that way would be great, but then the fact that they've earned it after all the shit everybody goes through, then it takes on a whole other meaning. It's more of a redemptive meaning, if anything. It's less of a this is how you ought to be, and more of like a after all we've been through, we have to come at this thing from a place of love, because that's the only thing that makes sense to do, and it is all you really need at the end of the day. And so that to me made a much stronger statement than it otherwise may have if it had been in a different way.
So I hate to move forward, but let's go ahead and move into our production design, which I really think that is, yes, story-wise, music-wise, and we'll hit music in a bit. We really don't need to spend long in music because we've talked about it for most of the thing. But I think the production design, the whole thing, all of the costumes, everything there, it's just spectacular feast for all the senses. But that's just my way of looking at it.
Oh, yeah.
Well, it got an Oscar nomination for best costume design. I think I would have.
It was the only nod, wasn't it?
It was. Now I would have nominated for cinematography and art direction, probably at the very least.
And also, this is a movie. This is one of the movies. Brandon probably knows this.
Dialogue.
This is one of the movies that's why I've been saying there needs to be an Oscar for use of music in film. This one would have absolutely been a deserving contender for that. But yes, definitely the camera work by Bruno de Benel was phenomenal. The costumes and the set design. They did point out, and watching the film enough times, you do kind of pick up on these cues. But like different segments, different sequences are filmed in very different ways and tend to have different color palettes. Like the Lilliputian segments are not Liverpudlian, however you say that.
In Liverpool.
Yes. They're cooler, they're drabber, there's more earth tones, there's not a lot of color. Whereas like the Lucy's family and their neighborhood is very warm tones, a lot of color. And then you get into, the New York where everyone ends up living, and it's like a riot of color in like that. That I like that one store the Psychedelicatessen, I think is what it was called. I'm like,
Great
that looks
name.
Yeah.
If I ever opened a store, that'd be a good name to call it. I think definitely should have gotten more nominations than it did. I looked at the release date of it. It had its Toronto International Film Festival. It had its premiere September 14th, 2007, and then a wide release October 12th. Had this come out earlier in the year, I kind of wonder if the Cannes Film Festival would have taken more notice of this, because the Beatles do have an international appeal still to this day, and I think Europeans would get into the psychedelica aspect of it, perhaps even more than Americans would, because keep in mind they also really loved Sin City when it came out, and that one also used then modern film techniques to push the boundaries of how to tell a story visually.
That one.
But the Cannes Film Festival, they really dug it, and they otherwise might not have dug a comic book movie, and yet they really dug that one. So I don't know, maybe they would have liked this if it had come out more in their nomination schedule or whatever. It is worth pointing out that the film was a humongous box office bomb and was very mixed critically. Yeah, humongous bomb.
People are stupid.
It does have a notable cult following now, as it's fairly obvious.
It's a perfect film.
Well, to the point where I just read this, apparently Julie Taymor is talking to Jim Sturgis, like as of 2020, talking to Jim Sturgis and to Evan Rachel Wood about possibly doing a sequel set in the 70s with more Beatles music. Now that would be something.
Oh, I'd love it.
That'd be pretty cool.
I'd love to see that. Yeah,
I
and
hope
they would probably never do this. What I'm about to say, they'd probably never do this, but I think it'd be really cool if not only Beatles songs, but like if they incorporated some of like the early solo stuff from John, Paul, George, Ringo. They would never do that because I'm sure the right situation would be all up in the air. But it's like, imagine if you had like Give Me Some Truth next to maybe I'm Amazed.
You could have Imagine. You could have Imagine.
I would say one as far as the right situation. Apparently, everyone, both Ringo Starr and Paul McCartney, and the widows of George Harrison and John Lennon all like this movie. They all signed off on it, and they all apparently like it. And actually, a fun trivia I saw was that apparently Wood and Sturgis happened to realize that Ringo Starr was about to watch the film, and they were in town. And so they booked it over there to watch it with him, and that was like the great memory for them.
Yeah, I would have lost my mind if I were them. Just because. Well, I would also be nervous as hell because I'm like, what if he hates it? But let's also keep in mind that all four Beatles were alive to see the 1979 Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album, which was the movie, which was the first attempt to do a jukebox Beatles musical on the big screen. And they did not like that one, but then Paul and Ringo got to see this, and obviously it's a lot more reverential for the Beatles and for the 60s as a period.
One thing I would say, though, if they are trying to move it forward into the 70s, it wouldn't make much sense to lean heavily on the Beatles. It would make a lot more sense if you want to stick in that camp to do the solo work that was coming out in the 70s. You would still have really solid music there.
Yeah, like Again, if they could clear up the rights, which again that might be its own battle, but like I would love to see like It Don't Come Easy next to All Things Must Pass and Imagine and Oh My Love. I could just rattle them off, but it's like what an interesting point of comparison and contrast there, because a lot of what made them the Beatles does carry over into their solo stuff, but not all of it, because they did
Right.
go off in their own directions.
Well,
So
like,
it'd be interesting to hear,
I could see
how they would
Imagine
tackle
being a
it.
Beatles song.
well,
Yeah,
yeah.
well,
I was going to say, as far as Lennon stuff goes, and we were talking before about Jude being maybe less than fully motivated. Watching The Wheels would be a perfect one for him. But
or like How Do You Sleep?
yeah.
He could
But
be, having an argument with Lucy. That'd be a good track for him.
yeah.
Well, what about everybody else? What are y'all's thoughts as far as art design and music? Like I say, I feel like we've gotten music mostly covered, but what are the rest of y'all's thoughts on this?
It looks really good.
it does.
The sequences that are more creative, like they really stand out, and it's okay. I think you figured out that I was really bored throughout almost the entire run of this movie. It was like, what am I even watching? Like, why am I bothering? Like, I am making a point to never stop watching a movie, but this was a movie where I actually considered shutting it off for a brief period of time. And those sequences would pop up, and it would be like, okay, now this is really interesting. So those were extremely well done, and they make the movie worth your time, in my opinion.
Well, at least you found something.
Hey, that's the art design is what got me interested in the movie in the first place originally. So I'm not.
And you stuck
I'd
with
like
this.
to-
You stuck with the discussion too. So more power to you.
I'd like to say I love the design, the costumes, and everything as well. Everything to me in this movie, like I said, is perfect. I mean, I love all of it. I mean, maybe probably because I am a huge Beatles fan, but like I said, even not being a Beatles fan, I can see this movie working. Maybe not quite as well, but it's still a very interesting movie, and it is fun, and it has so much visual stuff. I mean, trippy stuff and other things. It's just a well-rounded movie, and they use everything to the best they can.
Yeah, the visuals are what keeps attracting me to the film, even though it wasn't like a film that I was drawn to. I watched it because Tammy wanted to see it. So ultimately, and I did hear about it in certain musical circles while I was like in college and whatnot, because that was like after I like graduated from high school and stuff like that. So
This was a great high school movie for me to see, because it's kind of got a high school, maybe early college kind of appeal, or like someone like a Roger Ebert who would have grown up with the 60s. He gave this movie a full 4 stars out of 4. So it's definitely got an appeal of different sorts, but I think the thing that I come back to about it, possibly more than anything, is that original movie musicals are pretty much dead, and musicals as a genre are more or less dead unless they're adapting something from Broadway, and even then their hands are often tied behind their back because they're trying to adapt something that was limited to a stage, and there's only so much you can do on a stage. This thing really just stretches the film medium to about as far as it can go in terms of like the scope of the story and how they jump across the globe more than once, and they represent ideas that you could not easily do on the stage. I mean, say what you want about Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark. They definitely tried to push the stage to its furthest extent, and obviously people got injured all the time because of it, but like it wasn't for lack of trying. Julie Taymor is always trying to push whatever medium to its fullest extent, and I give her all the credit in the world for that. I think she resoundingly succeeded with this one, and particularly in an underserved genre like the musical film. And this is unquestionably an original musical film, albeit with, pre-existing music, but still, it's just the way in which to communicate these ideas in a way that's unique to film that cannot be replicated on the stage. I think that was a resounding success.
All right. Well, why don't we go ahead and wrap up this? It's getting late on East Coast, at least. So why don't we go with this?
Like midnight, Lord.
It's almost 1 a.m. here.
Yeah, I was going to say it's almost 1 a.m. on this side of the coast. So why don't we just quickly go through with favorite scenes and favorite favorite version of the song throughout. Well, favorite of these versions of the songs from the soundtrack. So I guess why don't we start with Jake, since we ended with you last time.
Okay, I can do that. There's so many moments. This one's hard to pick favorites, but there are a few that are close. And for the most part, they mirror my favorite song moments. I would say my favorite Beatles song by a slight margin is When My Guitar Gently Weeps. And I absolutely love this version. But I also very much love the renditions of Let It Be and I Want to Hold Your Hand. Those scenes are three of my favorite scenes in the movie. And I'd probably lump in the come together scene and a couple little moments here and there as overall favorite scenes in the film. Yeah, I'll probably have to leave it at that.
All right. How about you, Dustin?
Well, I think my favorite scene is probably that like recruitment thing with the Uncle Sam poster coming to life.
Oh, and that.
That was the first moment I was like, okay, there's stuff going on here. We can keep going. And it was like really trippy, and I really enjoyed it. Plus, with kind of the how exactly do I put this? Where it kind of like has that sequence where it sort of symbolizes him being like drafted and stuff and going through boot and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
How they put like angular like faces on the guys doing the background dancing to make them look like statues. I thought that was really cool. I was a big fan of that.
All right.
And happiness is worn gone.
Yeah. Let's see here. We got that. How about you, Tammy? What was your favorite scene and favorite song in this?
Well, I had a lot of scenes that I really enjoyed. I mean, the favorite song one's easy because When My Guitar Gently Weeps is one of my favorite songs, and I really do like how they did it in here.
Mm-hmm.
So, for scenes, well, I liked it when they went all trippy. That was kind of cool.
Indeed.
That whole thing was neat, because David really likes the Yellow Submarine movie. So, as soon as it got to the blue guys and everything and all that, I was like, hey, I remember them. And, so, that whole thing where they went for the trippy and then they went to the circus and everything. I like that whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So.
How about you, Dane? Favorite song, favorite scene?
Well, it's funny because again, my favorite Beatles song, just in general, is "Helter Skelter," and that one was played relatively straight. That's actually one of my lesser favorite moments. The one that I think serves the best dramatic payoff and is the best film-centric version of a song is "Let It Be." That whole scene's incredibly powerful, and hearing that song in a gospel style, I thought was and making it really somber and everything, I was like, "Man, this really, like, elevated this song to a whole other level in a way that the song, as good as it is in and of itself, that just took it to a whole other level, and what a context in which to put it." I, like, absolutely love that scene. In terms of like so I'm of two minds because like I have that part of me that's really like I love juxtaposition of really powerful like kind of traumatic grisly imagery with that kind of beautiful song but in a somber way. That's that one side of me, and then the other side of me, I really love just batshit insanity, and you get like 3 in a row with, that kinda blend into each other with, I Am the Walrus, Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, and Because. I mean, the one that connects the most with me personally at this point in my life, I really do love the underwater scene, 'cause it is so otherworldly, it's romantic, you could read it kinda creepily, it's psychedelic, it's a little bit like if you could somehow supplant, the Garden of Eden, like that kind of, innocence, innocent nudity, innocent embracing, and take it from an agrarian setting into underwater, so it makes it more ethereal, more spiritual, more, otherworldly. I think that really stuck with me this time.
All right. Forrest, favorite scene, favorite song.
I definitely like. I also definitely like the nod to the Blue Meanies. But I would say favorite moment was probably I Am the Walrus. Really like nice a good psychedelic scene. Like this really liked how the special effects on that part. Favorite Beatles song though. I'll say Yellow Submarine is probably the one album I've listened to the most from the Beatles. And as well as I've seen watching as well as the movie, that movie itself. Um, hmm. Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, I can't quite pin down a favorite Beatles song. But also, like I said, Yellow Submarine is probably the one album from them that I've listened to the most.
Okay. Well, how about you, Kroll? What was your favorite scene in here and the favorite song in here?
I can't have one favorite, so I got a few that I have to mention. Sorry, but "Let It Be" is my favorite song as an adult. Like I said, when I was younger, I had 2 different ones that didn't even make it into the movie. But yeah, it's my favorite song, and that scene was just absolutely Dana's 100% right with it. Just the way they did it with the scene and then the change it and like I said before, I don't really particularly like gospel, but the way they did it fit the scene. It was really well done. Um, definitely an awesome scene. As I mentioned before, the laundromat scene, the just the way they were fighting with each other, just was awesome. Not that they were fighting, but just what they said is just they both made great points, and they were both had passionate about what they were believed in.
Yeah,
How they
one
did
of the better non-sung scenes for sure.
exactly, and I like Dustin said though. I Want You. That was definitely. I got to note that as well because it was definitely uh, crazy, and to me they seem more like robots and statues. But either way, I mean, it's definitely crazy, and it definitely I could see anyone going through that, not voluntarily, feeling that way, like they're just their clothes being taken off, they're not having saying the matter, they're just forced into all that. It just encapsulates all that into that scene. And then the the I Am the Walrus, although that again not one of my favorite songs, but that's the way Bono did it was, I'd say, almost better than the original. And it was very trippy, and it was such a great scene, and I absolutely love the carnival scene, as I've already mentioned. And that water scene was really well done, really well done. I am definitely not much of an artsy person, but that was really well done.
It's beautiful.
Really enjoyed it. And then now we go on to my ex favorite is the encore, the All You Need Is Love, and the rooftop scene, and it just, I saw the the documentary, whatever you want to call it, on Disney Plus, and they actually had that rooftop scene, and it mirrored that rooftop scene to a degree, and I really love how they did that to end the show movie, just like the way they ended that, and it was just really well done, and he got her attention, and like everyone had already said, it was I mean, I always love that song, and I wouldn't roll my eyes at the bumper sticker. I would say that's right, because I've always agreed that way, but that's just the way I think. But I do agree that it was definitely put in the perfect spot for the movie, and it was definitely earned, and it was just absolutely perfect way to end an awesome movie.
All right. So Dave, what was your favorite scene, favorite song?
Well, I would have to say that my there are so many good ones. It's not that I didn't like the movie. I love the army scene. I love the part where Jude pretty much tells JoJo that he just didn't really have a cause to stand for, and I did like the "Come Together" song with Joe Cocker and all that. I thought it was great that he could do like 3 different roles. And I really liked the Strawberry Fields rendition in here. And it is an emotional movie when you think about it, all the visual imagery that goes along with it. As far as favorite song of the Beatles, I have many. When I'm 64, The Yellow Submarine, While My Guitar Gently Weeps is a good one. Nowhere Man. I like a lot of those. So Eleanor Rigby was always a good one.
Yeah. One of my least favorite omissions from this, because Eleanor Rigby is my second favorite song of theirs. I don't know. They didn't even have an Eleanor character anywhere in there.
Yeah, I wonder how you could have fit it in this already kind of stuffed narrative.
Oh, perfect opportunity for a
Somewhere in
sequel.
England, they could have had one.
Right.
Yeah, well, but I was also the guy who, my favorite Elvis song is "Love Me Tender," and that wasn't in Baz Luhrmann's Elvis film, so I understand.
Well,
Is that the new one?
Yeah, the one that was in theaters. Great movie, but yeah, "Love Me Tender" is my favorite Elvis song, and I was like, where is it? And it's not there, but whatever. A lot of good.
Can't Buy Me Love and Twist and Shout were my favorite as a kid.
Yeah, which Twist and Shout's a cover, but
I know, it was just I love their version of it.
Yeah, great. Well, hey, we got Ferris Bueller singing it in the fair. What more do you want?
And we had the movie Can't Buy Me Love too, but
that too.
So, I mean, as far as the movie, favorite scene, favorite song in the movie was "Happiness Is a Warm Gun." I just love that with the scene. But that visual of them marching with the Statue of Liberty on top would have always holds off for me.
Yeah, that is powerful.
So with that being said, that's the end of our discussion. So let's go ahead and hit those outros. Let's start with you, Kroll.
Well, I'm Ron, aka Kroll. I enjoy watching movies, playing video games. Actually learning to code on the side now. And I love coming on this podcast. And I come on the podcast with Dave on Sundays and talk about movies there as well. And been on a few anime and a couple podcasts with Mo, who is a little absent tonight. He's not the biggest Beatles fan, but we'll forgive him for a one transgression.
Well, I shall hope he's on next time. He's hosting.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I would like to point out that I really love Judith is my favorite character, and the best line in the movie is "You got my left nipple wrong." Just had to point that out there. All right, I'm done.
All right, Forrest.
I like This Is Rita. She's a contortionist.
All right, my name's Forrest Bennett. I'm a independent film producer and occasional actor in Long Island, New York. I've got a recently was a project I worked on called Victim No More is out on YouTube. It's Friday the 13th fan film. Also, got a couple of movies coming out this holiday season: Amityville Thanksgiving and Silent Night Bloody Night 3. I acted in both of them, and I'm also on a podcast called Nostalgia Time with Kid Champagne, where we just did a feature length commentary on Sleepaway Camp. Also on a public access show. Also make appearances on a public access show here in New York called Under the Radar, where we discuss newer movies and TV shows. I've always got something going on in the pipeline.
Awesome. And of course, if you want to hear a discussion about Victim No More on Mo's channel, Retro Cult Home Video and Schlockaholics, we have had a discussion of that and its relevance to the fan film, Friday the 13th fan film group in particular. So kind of fun to talk about. How about you, Dane?
Well, I am Dane Kyle. I'm a filmmaker and a YouTuber now. I've done 2 ginormous month-long review series called Oztober and August in Wonderland, which I am proud to say Jake and Brandon were involved in. And you can find that on my channel, Dangerous Arts. Yeah, much appreciated. You can find that on my channel, Dangerous Arts. And definitely stay tuned for more exciting developments in the near future. And glad to have been on for this one. Sorry to have missed it the first time, but I had my head buried firmly in Oz and then in Wonderland, and I'm about to bury my head in something else entirely, but I don't really want to say what it is until it gets closer to time, because I want it to be a surprise.
Well, I really did enjoy the August in Wonderland, so very much worth the effort, and I plan on taking some time from it and then coming back and doing it all as one big grouping again, because I'm sure it's going to be just as fun having it another time around, much like Oztober. With this one having even more twists and turns. So
for August, yeah, I'm gonna have to figure out. Oztober, I don't have time to do a full month-long thing. I might do a special or something. I don't know, but yeah, I need to get out of Wonderland for a little while, and then I'll come back to it.
how about let's see. How about you, Jake?
All right. I'm Kotobukijake. I am a fan and frequent viewer and sometimes, amateur critic, what have you, of films and TV and anime and all that fun stuff, various kinds of media, co-host of SeptumSin versus the World, which, of course, Brandon will tell you a little bit more about shortly. But we just came off of our end-of-month discussion of Clamp School Detectives, which is a show that perhaps deserves to be forgotten, but, we had a fun and spirited discussion about it. And, we do pick up vids and whatnot. Meanwhile, I keep my plate quite busy, work full-time in the library, and also work as a co-founder of RVA Homegrown Natives, which is a native plant grower and distributor. And we will be having our glorious return to market after a short hiatus tomorrow. So weather permitting, so hopefully that'll happen well, and looking forward to it, because market is the most fun part of that job. I also do side projects here and there. As Dane mentioned, Brandon and I did some stuff with August Wonderland. I've got some stuff I've put some money in on Kickstarter, and one of them, documentary called Tipping the Pain Scale, is gearing up for a proper release here shortly. And I know there's some others in the works too. And just a random thought to throw out there. We were talking about possible future projects. This deserves a Criterion release, and I really hope that they manage to get Paul and Ringo to do a commentary track. That would be incredible. But anyway, there you go.
All right, Dustin.
Well, I collect horror movie stuff. I have a YouTube channel for my pickup videos called The Crypt of Horrors. Starting to think I need a shorter name because it's always a mouthful. And I haven't been able to pick anything up for a while, but I do have a lot of things I haven't filmed yet, so I'm going to try to release something this week. I also have an Instagram for the horror collection, also The Crypt of Horrors, and I've been posting there a bit more consistently. So give that a follow. And I hang out on Twitter a lot as Cryptaxis. I want Cryptaxis, but some idiot has it, so hence the Dur. So follow me there, and you can see me just kind of screwing around most of the days. Yeah, The Crypt of Horrors. Just find me.
All right, Tammy.
Hello. Well, I am Dave's fiance, and I love going on here and another one on Sundays and talking about movies and finding out everybody else's opinions and thoughts. And now that it's summer, I enjoy my 1972 Grand Prix, which I have a very big show on Saturday.
All right, very good. Well, I'm SeptumSin of SeptumSin versus the World. We like physical media here. We're working on the Versus Awards right now, but we hope to come back in the future. We're hoping to get it all done so we can get it out to you by the end of the month. But otherwise, other projects we'll talk about later on. But next week here on the show, Mo is having a birthday celebration, and he's going to celebrate with two fun classics, Yojimbo and Sanjiro. So very fun movies there. So for sticking around.
Alrighty. And my name is David Streggy. I'm one of the founding fathers of Inside Movies Galore. So thank you for coming along with us on this fantabulous journey that we have been discussing films of all natures, and I think we've had a fun time of it so far. So but I also moonlight under a different channel called Delusions of Grandeur, where we podcast under the same name, which I believe I have chosen the movie. I believe we will be doing The Alien Dead. So the film that I couldn't figure out forever, and then suddenly someone came up with the title, and I was like, hey, okay. So but I also do video pickups and my own video reviews on the same channel. So like, share, and subscribe. Hopefully you get some fun out of these channels. We have a blast doing it, and providing you with some entertaining conversations. So hopefully we'll see you back here next week. And everyone say good night.
Good
Good
night.
night, everyone.
Final note: the
Good night,
Megabot can
everybody.
get you a
Good
bed.
night.
Yay!
Right.
Hey, good night.